Chapter 113. Lan Yunhai smiled. This meant that he had given in. In the end, Nie Tian won this psychological battle. Nie Tian and Lan Yunhai were playing a psychological game. Whoever could endure, it would be the winner. Of course, Nie Tian's persistence was based on his confidence in himself. If Lan Yunhai had rejected him, the royal family of Blue Cloud would have faced an unprecedented calamity. Xiao Liang was dumbfounded. He never thought that the emperor would accept Nie Tian's threat. Good. Mr. Nie, I agree to your conditions. Lan Yunhai put away his awkward smile and said coldly, but I hope that Mr. Nie will fulfill his promise. Nie Tian nodded and said calmly, if I can't cure the princess, I will die with her. Good. Lan Yunhai laughed. Mr. Nie is indeed straightforward. I admire you. After that, Nie Tian briefly explained what had happened to him. Lan Yunhai's expression darkened as he said, they were kidnapped in the Wu city. Are the imperial city's imperial guards stupid? Guards, bring Qin Yetian to see me. Lan Yunhai roared, his voice resounding through the entire righteous virtue hall. Lan Bingshun secretly smiled at Lan Yunhai's reaction. Lan Bingshun was not a fool. He could more or less guess that Lan Binji had something to do with this. Based on Lan Bingshun's understanding of his brother, this was most likely Lan Binji's plan. Imperial father, go ahead and be angry. The angrier you are, the better. Lan Bingshun was already laughing in his heart. If this matter really dragged Lan Binji out, there would be a good show to watch. With Nie Tian's temperament, he would definitely not let this matter rest. At this moment, Lan Bingshun suddenly felt that Nie Tian was his benefactor. Unfortunately, Nie Tian was not willing to accept him as a disciple. Not long after, Qin Yetian's figure appeared in the righteous virtue hall. When he saw Nie Tian, he was instantly dumbfounded. His head buzzed, and an ominous feeling rose in his heart. This subject greets your majesty. Qin Yetian knelt on the ground and cowed out. Sensing that the emperor's mood wasn't right, Qin Yetian could no longer remain calm. Lan Yunhai had been very dissatisfied with Qin Yetian for the past few days. The pill refinement master that the Qin family had invited to treat the princess not only failed to cure her illness, but also worsened her condition, causing her to be on the verge of death. Gu Sanso had already left the Blue Cloud Empire, but he had left Qin Yetian with a pile of sh*t. Qin Yetian, you know Mr. Nie, right? Lan Yunhai spoke in a low voice that carried a wisp of gloom. Yes. Qin Yetian did not dare to raise his head to look at Lan Yunhai. He only lowered his head and answered, good. He has some questions for you. Lan Yunhai nodded and glanced at Nie Tian. Nie Tian naturally didn't hold back. He took a step forward and said in a cold tone, Qin Yetian, my sister was kidnapped in Wu City. I want you to find her. Qin Yetian finally raised his head and looked at Nie Tian with a difficult expression, then said, Mr. Nie, I have never seen your sister before. If I want to find her, I'm afraid that it won't be easy. I can only try my best. As for whether or not I can find her, that... Qin Yetian, listen to me clearly. You don't have to try your best. You have to find her no matter what. Furthermore, I want to see that my sister is completely fine and unharmed. Without waiting for Qin Yetian to finish speaking, Lan Yunhai directly interrupted him. Qin Yetian was the commander of the Imperial Guards. How could he not know that someone was kidnapped in the Imperial Guards? If he didn't know anything, then there would be no meaning for him to be the commander of the Imperial Guards. Qin Yetian swallowed his saliva, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. He bowed and replied, Mr. Nie, don't worry. I will definitely find her within 3 days no matter the cost. 3 days? Nie Tianling sneered, stared at Qin Yetian, and said word by word, Qin Yetian, you only have half an hour's time. Half an hour? Qin Yetian looked at Nie Tian in astonishment and cried out in surprise. Lan Yunhai also went into a daze for a moment and said, Mr. Nie, half an hour's time is too little. Nie Tian raised his head and looked at Lan Yunhai, then said indifferently, Your Majesty, I believe that Master Xiao hasn't explained the princess's condition to you clearly, right? Lan Yunhai's expression darkened as he looked at Xiao Liang. Xiao Liang's expression slightly stiffened. Knowing that he couldn't hide the matter anymore, he whispered a few words to Lan Yunhai. After listening to Xiao Luyang's words, Lan Yunhai's expression darkened. After a moment of silence, his eyes suddenly emitted a bright light, and he shouted furiously, "Qin Yetian, mobilize all the forces that can be mobilized, dig 3 feet into the ground. Even if you have to turn Blue Cloud City upside down, you must find Mr. Nie's sister. If you can't find her within half an hour, come and see me with your head." Xiao Luyang told Lan Yunhai that Lan Bingxian had at most an hour left. If she couldn't receive treatment within an hour, she would die without a doubt. Lan Yunhai only had one daughter, and he treated her like a pearl in his palm and doted on her. It was precisely because of Lan Bingxuan's illness that Lan Yunhai's mood was depressed every day. In this current situation, if he couldn't find Nie Yuro, Nie Tian would definitely not save her. Therefore, Nie Yuro must be found within half an hour, otherwise, Lan Bingxuan's life would be in danger. When Lan Yunhai's last sentence of "come and see me with your head" fell, Qin Yeqian's whole body turned sluggish, and he suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. This sentence was like a thunderclap from the ninth heaven, exploding in Qin Yetian's mind. He suddenly felt dizzy, and his mind was in a trance. His body swayed, and he almost fell down. As the saying goes, a monarch must not joke. For Lan Yunhai to say such words at this time, it was absolutely not a joke. Qin Yetian originally wanted to report this matter to Lan Bingji or the Empress, then slowly think of a way to deal with this matter. But from the looks of it now, he didn't have the time to do so. "What are you still standing there for? Quickly go and find her." Seeing that Qin Yetian was still in a daze, Lan Yunhai couldn't help but become even more furious and almost roared out, "Yes, yes, yes, I will go and find her right now." Qin Yetian nodded his head, wiped away the sweat on his forehead, and ran out of the Righteous Virtue Palace without stopping. Seeing that Qin Yetian ran out of the palace, Lan Yunhai's attitude became humble and said carefully, "Mr. Nye, Qin Yetian has already gone to find her, the princess. Wait until he finds her first." Nie Tianling coldly interrupted Lan Yunhai's words, not caring about what expression Lan Yunhai had on his face. Nie Tian had to find Nie Yuro within half an hour. He had to ensure Nie Yuro's safety. And if Nie Yuro was injured or missing anything, Nie Tian definitely wouldn't let the matter rest. Lan Yunhai's eyes turned cold, and a cold glint floated past his eyes, but he didn't say anything. Zhang Yifeng accompanied Nie Tian and stood in the palace, quietly waiting for Qin Yetian's news. After Qin Yetian ran out of the palace, he returned to the Qin residence at full speed. With the emperor's supervision, Qin Yetian naturally didn't dare to be negligent. Chapter 114. Father. Qin Yulong subconsciously shouted when he saw Qin Yetian rushing over anxiously. "Take me to see Nie Yuro." Qin Yetian bellowed angrily, like a berserk beast. Qin Yulong froze for a moment and immediately said, "That little girl was taken away by third brother. She is now in third brother's room." Qin Yulong was stunned for a moment before he suddenly shouted, "Bastard! Let him take her away." "Bing! Bing! Didn't His Highness Binji say that the little girl was given a third brother?" Qin Yulong was quite frightened. He knew that something had happened and his tongue was tied. Qin Yetian's face was extremely gloomy and he panted heavily. Lan Binji did say that, but Qin Yetian didn't think that Qin Yulong would actually dare to do it. A castrated trash still doesn't give people peace of mind. Qin Yetian beat his chest and stamped his feet. "Father, father? Did something happen?" Qin Yulong saw that Qin Yetian's expression was abnormally panicked, so he probed. "How long has Yulong taken her away?" Qin Yetian forced himself to calm down and asked in horror. He knew his own son. Qin Yetian naturally knew Qin Yulong like the back of his hand. This son of his had no other ability but to torture little girls. Most of the teenage maids in the mansion had been abused by Qin Yulong. Many of them even died in Qin Yulong's hands. "Yes, yes, it's been half an hour." Qin Yulong suddenly shouted, "Did third brother kill that little girl?" Rumble. This sentence was like a clap of thunder that suddenly exploded in Qin Yetian's heart. He suddenly felt his 3 souls leave his body and his 7 mortal forms leave his body. His entire body swayed, and he almost fell. "Father, father, are you okay?" Qin Yulong hurriedly supported Qin Yetian. Large beads of sweat rolled down his face. Without a doubt, this time the Qin family was in big trouble. "Quick, take me to Yulong's room." Qin Yetian pushed Qin Yulong away and stumbled out. If something really happened to Nye Yuro, Qin Yetian would definitely be buried with her. If he died, the entire Qin family's pillar of support would fall, and the Qin family wouldn't be far from collapsing. Qin Yetian, Qin Yulong, and his son, Qin Yetian, arrived at a unique courtyard in the inner compound. Outside the courtyard, a few young maidservants were muttering about something. "Little girl, you'd better obediently follow this young master. Otherwise, this young master will sell you to a brothel and let you be a piece of trash that thousands of men sleep on. You don't know, but those high officials and nobles like little girls like you the most." "Ha ha ha!" Qin Yulong's shrill and wild laughter came from the small courtyard. Qin Yulong was no longer a man. Even his voice was sharp and ear-piercing. In the room, Nye Yuro hugged Bab tightly and curled up in a dark corner. Her eyes were wet with tears. She was clearly frightened. Qin Yulong walked over step by step. He was extremely careful, and his eyes were fixed on the little Pishio in Nye Yuro's arms. Qin Yulong had seen the power of the little Pishio. Even Gu Sanso was frozen after being bitten by the little Pishio. Qin Yulong was bitten by the little Pishio just now. Until now, half of Qin Yulong's arm was still numb, and he couldn't feel anything. Whoa! Bab bared its teeth and let out a threatening sound. It would definitely not let anyone hurt Nye Yuro. Although Bab was only a month old, it already had some intelligence. It stayed with Nye Yuro every day, and it was even more dependent on Nye Tian. Nye Tian was the first face that Bab saw after it was born. Spiritual beasts would instinctively treat the first face that they saw as their mother. Therefore, Bab saw Nye Tian as its first master, and Nye Yuro had been with it day and night, so she was its second master. This little thing is a little troublesome. Qin Yulong's face was slightly embarrassed. He was very afraid of Bab. Qin Yulong carefully approached Nye Yuro. He was extremely nervous. "Yulong." At this moment, a furious roar sounded out like a clap of thunder. Qin Yulong was so shocked that his body trembled, and he almost peed in his pants. When he recognized that it was Qin Yetian's voice, he heaved a sigh of relief. "Father, what's wrong?" Qin Yulong opened the door and saw Qin Yetian rushing over angrily. His heart immediately sank. Qin Yetian ignored him and directly barged into the room. When he saw that Nye Yuro was still alive, he immediately felt relieved. As long as Nye Yuro was still alive, everything would be easy. Qin Yetian walked out of the room and looked at Qin Yulong. He asked he didn't do anything to her, right? No. Qin Yulong noticed that there was something wrong with Qin Yetian's gaze. He immediately shook his head like a rattle drum. "Does she know who you are?" Qin Yetian suddenly asked. "Yes, she knows." Qin Yulong nodded subconsciously. Nye Yuro had already recognized Qin Yulong, and she also knew that she was in the Qin residence. Qin Yetian suddenly closed his eyes as if he was thinking about something. "Yulong, don't blame father for being ruthless." Suddenly, Qin Yetian opened his eyes and suddenly struck out with his palm, heavily hitting the top of Qin Yulong's head. Bang! Qin Yulong's knees sank, and the top of his head exploded. Fresh blood gushed out, and he died on the spot. Before he died, Qin Yulong looked at Qin Yetian with a puzzled expression. His eyes were filled with doubt and unwillingness. He never imagined that he would die in the hands of his own father. "Father!" This scene happened to be seen by Qin Yulong, who had rushed over, and he immediately wailed. Qin Yetian brushed Qin Yulong's eyes and made him close them. His expression became somewhat dazed and sorrowful. He said in a low voice, "Yulong, in order to protect the Qin family, Yulong must die. Father has no choice but to do this." Nye Tian was not a fool. If he handed Nye Yuro over, he had to give him an explanation. Why was Nye Yuro in Qin Yulong's hands, and why was she in the Qin residence? If he could not answer these questions, Qin Yetian would still be implicated. In order to protect himself and the Qin family, Qin Yetian had to sacrifice Qin Yulong. Before Qin Yetian killed Qin Yulong, he had already thought of a way out. He would push everything on a Qin Yulong. He would say that Qin Yulong wanted to take revenge on Nie Tian, so he sent people to kidnap Nie Yuro. Of course, all the people in the Imperial Guards who were involved in this matter must die as well. Only by doing so could he hide the truth. Qin Yetian was vicious. He could even kill his own son. The death of a few Imperial Guards was of course insignificant to him. As the saying goes, even a vicious tiger would not eat its cubs. Qin Yetian was even more vicious than a beast. After killing Qin Yulong, Qin Yetian quickly calmed down. He called Qin Yulong over and said in a low voice, "Gather everyone who is involved in this matter." And then Qin Yetian made a gesture to silence him. Qin Yulong immediately understood and left immediately. Qin Yetian did not delay any further. He ordered a few servant girls to bring Nie Yuro out and personally carried Qin Yulong's corpse back to the palace. Of course, he had to put on a show. Qin Yetian wanted to bring Qin Yulong's corpse back to the palace. Chapter 115. Imperial Palace, Virtue Hall. Lan Yunhai sat in the hall, waiting anxiously. If Qin Yetian came a minute late, Lan Bingshuan's life would be in danger. At this time, in the hall beside Xiao Luyang, Nie Tan, Zhang Yifeng, and Lan Bingshun, there were two other figures, Jin Mingxin and Qi Feng. Both of them had learned of what had happened from Jin Debao and knew that Nie Tian had already arrived at the Imperial Palace, so they rushed over without stopping. Lan Yunhai was also slightly surprised. He didn't expect Nie Tian's influence to be so great that even Jin Mingxin and Qi Feng came over. The hall was deathly silent. Everyone was waiting for Qin Yetian to appear. If Qin Yetian couldn't bring Nie Yuro over, then today's Virtue Hall was bound to be a bloodbath. Nie Tian had already made up his mind. If he didn't see Nie Yuro, his next step would be to kill his way into the Binji Palace and ask Lan Binji for her. And if Lan Yunhai stopped him, Nie Tian didn't mind starting an all-out war with the imperial family. Although Nie Tian wasn't strong enough right now, Zhang Yifeng, Jin Mingxin, Qi Feng, and the others would definitely stand on his side. Therefore, he was very doubtful whether the imperial family had the courage to start an all-out war. Lan Yunhai also sensed that Nie Tian's emotions weren't right. He only hoped that Qin Yetian would bring good news. "Your Majesty, Commander Qin has returned." Qin Yetian was still several hundred meters away, but Xiao Luyang had already sensed his aura and hurriedly said to Lan Yunhai. Everyone looked out of the hall. Qin Yetian carried a corpse in his hand, and two servant girls followed behind him. The two servant girls brought a little girl with them. It was Nie Yuro, big brother Nie Tian. Nie Yuro hadn't even entered the hall when she saw Nie Tian from afar. She ran over and couldn't help but cry out. Nie Tian held Nie Yuro in his arms. When the latter had cried enough and calmed down, he carefully examined her. After confirming that Nie Yuro was all right, Nie Tian's taut face relaxed a little. When Lan Yunhai saw Qin Yetian carrying Qin Yulong's corpse in his hand, his expression turned gloomy as he asked, "Qin Yetian, what's going on?" Qin Yetian knelt on the ground and pointed at Qin Yulong's corpse. "Your Majesty, this is your subject's third son, Qin Yulong. He was the one who had kidnapped Miss Nie Yuro. This subject's son is a good-for-nothing and has a bad reputation. I wanted to discipline him more strictly, but I never had the time. My son and Mr. Nie have some personal grudges, and he has always harbored hatred in his heart. That's why he did such a wrong thing. It's really heartbreaking. Your subject has failed to teach my son properly and has made a grave mistake. Your Majesty, please punish me." After Qin Yetian finished speaking, he wept bitterly and kowtowed deeply to the ground. Lan Yunhai frowned and asked, "Then how did he die?" Qin Yetian howled in pain and said, "After I found out what happened, I couldn't bear to see this child continue to commit crimes, so I hardened my heart and personally executed him." "Personally killing your own son?" Lan Yunhai raised his eyebrows and said solemnly, "Qin Yetian, I have misjudged you. I didn't expect you to be able to do such a shocking thing." Lan Yunhai's voice was cold and filled with a chill. He wasn't a 3-year-old child, so he could obviously tell that Qin Yetian was spouting nonsense. Killing Qin Yulong was obviously to silence him. Lan Yunhai knew that the mastermind behind the kidnapping of Nie Yuro was definitely someone else. Then who could it be? Who would make Qin Yetian sacrifice his own son to protect Nie Yuro? Could it be? Lan Yunhai's expression suddenly changed, and a name appeared in his mind. Lan Binji. Lan Binji was Qin Yetian's nephew and had always been close to the Qin family. Thinking about how Lan Binji had just lost Niet Tian in the Tyrant Cloud freshman martial meet, Lan Yunhai guessed that the whole thing was most likely planned by Lan Binji. Lan Yunhai suddenly looked at Niet Tian strangely and was shocked to discover the killing intent in the latter's eyes. His heart shivered and he sighed. Binji, you shouldn't have offended Niet Tian. Offending someone you can't afford to offend could very possibly bring a disaster to the royal family. Lan Yunhai suddenly remembered what Niet Tian had said before. If you reject my conditions, the Blue Cloud Empire will welcome a disaster. Looking at it now, Niet Tian definitely had some awareness of the whole thing. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to only give Qin Yetian half an hour's time. And Lan Yunhai faintly felt that Niet Tian indeed had the strength to bring a disaster to the Blue Cloud Empire. Thinking up to this point, Lan Yunhai couldn't help but shiver. Lan Yunhai could tell that Qin Yetian was babbling nonsense, and so could Niet Tian. Everyone present was not a fool. Qin Yetian's words could deceive a 3-year-old child, but to want to deceive this group of intelligent people, it was simply impossible. Niet Tianling looked at Qin Yetian coldly and did not say a word. Lan Yunhai's cold gaze swept over, and he said, Qin Yetian, I am very gratified that you can place righteousness before family. But you can't escape responsibility for this matter. Qin Yulong is your son. You can't escape the crime of not teaching your son properly. Furthermore, young Lady Nie Yuro was kidnapped in the Martial City, and the Imperial Guard Army under you did not notice anything at all. You can't escape the crime of negligence of duty. You can't absolve yourself from the blame for 2 crimes. Lan Yunhai was well aware that this matter was related to Lan Binji and naturally did not want to pursue it. He might as well casually punish Qin Yetian and let it go. This subject is willing to accept punishment, Qin Yetian said with his head lowered. His back was already drenched in cold sweat, but he was already much more at ease. Lan Yunhai's words were very obvious. He was already deliberately shielding Qin Yetian. Lan Yunhai saw that Niet Tian was silent, so he coughed dryly and said, Mr. Nye, you are the victim in this matter. As for how to punish Qin Yetian, it will be up to you to decide. Lan Yunhai's words were completely out of consideration for Niet Tian's feelings. He pushed the boat along with the current, allowing Niet Tian to vent his anger on Qin Yetian. Niet Tianling looked coldly at Qin Yetian. His entire body was filled with undisguised killing intent. He opened his mouth and said word by word, I want him dead. As the cold and gloomy voice fell, the faces of everyone present froze at the same time. No one would have thought that Niet Tian would actually make such a request. If not for Niet Tian's gloomy face, everyone would have thought that he was joking. Niet Tian naturally knew that this matter was Lan Binji's doing, and Qin Yulong was only a little scapegoat. Since Lan Binji didn't dare to come out and admit it, then Niet Tian was going to cripple Qin Yetian. Lan Yunhai froze for a few seconds, and finally he laughed awkwardly and said, Mr. Nye, this punishment of yours is a bit. Without waiting for Lan Yunhai to finish, Niet Tian forcefully interrupted him and said, Your Majesty, if you feel that my punishment is too much, you don't have to carry it out. Lan Yunhai looked at Niet Tian, and a ball of stuffy fire was immediately suppressed in his chest. However, he still said kindly, Mr. Nye, please change the method of punishment. Niet Tian raised his head and took a look at Lan Yunhai, then said, I only have this method of punishment. If your Majesty doesn't wish to kill Qin Yetian, then forget about it. Chapter 116. Niet Tian wanted to kill Qin Yetian, and he wanted to use Qin Yetian to threaten Lan Yunhai. None of the people present were fools. Niet Tian naturally knew that Lan Yunhai was protecting Lan Binji. Since you want to protect Lan Binji, then be prepared to face my Niet Tian's fury. It didn't matter if Lan Yunhai killed Qin Yetian or not, Niet Tian would still treat Lan Bingxian. Lan Bingxian and Lan Bingji's matter were two separate matters, and Niet Tian had no choice but to put the two matters together. Now that the situation was clear, Niet Tian would deal with the two matters separately. Your Majesty, Qin Yetian was so scared that his gallbladder ruptured. He was afraid that Lan Yunhai would accidentally agree to Niet Tian's request. If that really happened, he wouldn't be able to find a grave even if he cried. Lan Yunhai muttered to himself for a while and said, Mr. Nye, although Qin Yetian is guilty, he doesn't deserve to die. I will give him punishment, but I won't kill him. Furthermore, I promise you that in the future, what happened today will never happen again in Blue Cloud City. If anyone dares to harm Miss Nye Yuro, no matter who it is, it will be on Qin Yetian's head. This is my decision. Mr. Nye, please accept it. Lan Yunhai had already made the biggest concession and directly tied Nye Yuro and Qin Yetian together. If anything happened to Nye Yuro, Qin Yetian would have to bear the responsibility. This meant that Qin Yetian had to ensure Nye Yuro's safety in the future, or else the one who died would be him. Everyone looked at Nye Tian, waiting for his reply. Lan Yunhai had already given Nye Tian enough face. Even someone with Xiao Luyang's status had never made Lan Yunhai feel so embarrassed before. Nye Tian's face was calm, and he said indifferently, I've already said that I only have one way to punish him, and that is to kill him. If your Majesty is not willing, then so be it. As for how your Majesty will punish him, that is your business, and has nothing to do with me. I will not accept it. So be it. Bring me to see the princess. Lan Yunhai had already made his decision, and Nye Tian wouldn't waste any more words with him. Since you want to protect your son, you should be prepared to pay the price. Lan Yunhai's expression was extremely unsightly. He'd never imagined that Nye Tian would be so stubborn. He'd already made such a huge concession, yet Nye Tian actually turned a blind eye to it and remained completely indifferent. At this time, everyone's expression was stiff. Xiao Luyang felt a little bitter in his heart. At this time, he suddenly had a strange feeling. Nye Tian's attitude towards him before was considered polite. All right, Grandmaster Xiao, please take Mr. Nye to see the princess. Lan Yunhai sighed with a complicated expression. At this point, the conflict between the two sides could no longer be resolved. This was the only way. Yes. Xiao Luyang hurriedly bowed and said to Nye Tian, Mr. Nye, please follow me. Xiao Luyang clearly saw through Nye Tian's attitude towards Lan Yunhai. At this time, he no longer dared to pretend to be arrogant in front of Nye Tian. But Feng come over as well. Nye Tian held Nye Yuro's hand and said indifferently to Zhang Yifeng. Yes, sir, Zhang Yifeng said respectfully as he followed Nye Tian. In a great hall, only a few people were left looking at each other in dismay and shock. After today's events, Qi Feng, Ji Mingxin, Lan Bingchun, and the others' view of Nye Tian had once again undergone a qualitative change. Nye Tian's position in their hearts had risen greatly. Lan Yunhai's face was gloomy. In his heart, he was still wondering if protecting Qin Yetian was the right choice. A moment later, under Xiao Luyang's lead, Nye Tian and the others arrived at the princess palace. Just as Nye Tian walked out of the palace, he smelled a pungent smell from afar. It carried traces of blood and hostility. The myriad poison body is indeed powerful. Nye Tian's brows slightly furrowed as he formed a seal with his hands. Soon after, a mysterious yuan power formation appeared on his palm. Nye Tian placed the array on Nye Yuro's body to protect her. With Nye Yuro's current strength, if she came within 10 meters of the myriad poison body, she would definitely be poisoned. Xiao Luyang looked at the array that Nye Tian had casually created. The shock in his heart was written all over his face. He never imagined that Nye Tian not only had amazing attainments in the alchemy Dao, but also cultivated the spirit array Dao. A spirit array master was in existence with a higher status than an alchemist. The princess palace was decorated very luxuriously. There were precious decorations everywhere. There were even many rare medicinal herbs that were greatly beneficial to a cultivator's cultivation. Nietian looked at the three-soul incense, emperor-grade heavenly knotweed, ice mountain snow lotus, octagonal coral, and a series of supplementary medicinal herbs in the room. His face immediately darkened. He said, Yifeng, put away all these things. These things were extremely important cultivation, supplementary materials for ordinary cultivators. They could subtly increase a cultivator's cultivation speed. But for the myriad poison body, these things were nearly fatal. It was hard to imagine that Lan Bingxian lived in such an environment every day. It was a miracle that she could persist until now. Nietian smiled faintly. He handed his interspatial ring to Zhang Yifeng and let him put away all the medicinal herbs. The interspatial ring was something Nietian had plundered from Juwan. The medicinal herbs in front of him were all Tier 3 and Tier 4 medicinal herbs. They were very precious. Of course, they couldn't be wasted. Xiao Liang frowned slightly. He didn't dare to stop them. The current Nietian was like a mountain in his eyes. He couldn't be questioned at will. Uncle Xiao, is that you? At this time, a soft voice sounded from inside the room. Your Highness. Xiao Liang heard the voice and hurriedly walked over. Nietian also walked in. He saw a gorgeous bed covered with various medicinal herbs. On it lay an 18 or 19-year-old girl. The girl's face was pale. She looked very weak, but there was a faint smile on her face. It gave people a very peaceful and quiet feeling. This girl looked very similar to Lan Bingxian. She was Lan Bingxian's twin sister, Lan Bingxian. Uncle Xiao, is someone here? Lan Bingxian heard other people's voices. She endured the pain and tried to sit up, but this simple action consumed all of Lan Bingxian's strength. Her beautiful face was dripping with sweat. Big sister, what's wrong? At this time, Nie Yuro suddenly ran in. Her small hand supported Lan Bingxian. She wanted to help her sit up. Nie Yuro was protected by the array that Nietian had set up. She wouldn't be harmed by the myriad poison body. Little sister, don't come near me, Lan Bingxian screamed and quickly distanced herself from Nie Yuro. In the past, when palace maids approached Lan Bingxian, they would inexplicably be poisoned. Lan Bingxian was afraid that Nie Yuro would also be poisoned. It's okay. With a faint smile, Nietian walked over and said in a soft voice, let her help you. He could see that Lan Bingxian was a very kind girl. Chapter 117. Lan Bingxian looked at Nietian in surprise. Feeling the overbearing confidence exuding from the latter, she didn't know how to refuse. Nie Yuro carefully helped Lan Bingxian sit up and smiled. Sister, he's my brother. He's here to treat you. Treat me? Lan Bingxian was surprised and immediately looked at Xiao Liang. Xiao Liang hurriedly bowed and said, Your Highness, this is Mr. Nietian. He's Master Zhang Yifeng's teacher, specially invited by His Majesty to treat Your Highness. Zhang Yifeng's teacher? Lan Bingxian's small face became even more surprised. Suddenly she laughed crisply. How old are you? Are you really Zhang Yifeng's teacher? Lan Bingxian saw that Nietian was a few years younger than her, and Zhang Yifeng was a third-rank alchemist. If Nietian was Zhang Yifeng's teacher, was he a fourth-rank alchemist? Lan Bingxian stayed in her bedroom every day and knew very few people. Besides Xiao Liang, Zhang Yifeng was the other person who often came to see her. But she didn't know that Zhang Yifeng was actually a little beggar she had given alms to when she was young. Every time Zhang Yifeng came to see Lan Bingxian, he would come with Xiao Liang. In the world of alchemy, the wise are respected. Nietian smiled faintly and said, I can become Yifeng's teacher. Naturally, I have my own strength. It has nothing to do with my age. Teacher, Nietian said. Zhang Yifeng had already walked in and respectfully returned the spatial ring to Nietian. Lan Bingxian was even more surprised. Looking at the somewhat funny master and disciple pair in front of her, she couldn't help but giggle. The laughter was very sweet, very beautiful, like a silver bell, making people who heard it couldn't help but want to laugh together. Lan Bingxian had a pair of crystal-clear eyes, looking very pure, without a trace of filth. Living under the threat of death every day, Lan Bingxian could still maintain a pure heart. She was indeed a kind girl. Nietian looked around Lan Bingxian and couldn't help but frown and shake his head. Lan Bingxian was surrounded by all kinds of precious herbs, some of which were used to help martial artists cultivate, while others were used to resist the bloody aura on Lan Bingxian's body. Yifeng, carry the princess out of this room, Nie Tian said lightly. Lan Bingxian had the myriad poison body. Before her myriad poison body matured, this kind of environment was a huge torture for her. It was hard to imagine that in such an environment, Lan Bingxian could still maintain an optimistic attitude. This, Zhang Yifeng's face turned red, and a difficult expression appeared on his face. No, Xiao Liang immediately objected. Her royal highness is priceless. How can she be hugged by another man at will? Nie Tian slightly frowned. He looked at Xiao Luyang and said in a cold voice, "You have no idea what kind of pain the princess is living in every day. It's all because of quacks like you who used medicine in a panic that the princess became like this. I'm the one who's treating the princess now, so it's better for those unrelated to keep their mouths shut." Nie Tian, Xiao Luyang was so angry that his beard was sticking up, but he couldn't say a single word. What Nie Tian said was right. If Lan Bingxian didn't live in such an environment where herbs were everywhere, her myriad poison body would have already achieved some success, and she definitely wouldn't be in such a state now. Lan Bingxian, who was watching from the side, was extremely shocked, her small mouth opened wide. She naturally knew of Xiao Luyang's identity. Even her father didn't dare to speak to Xiao Luyang like this. Who exactly is Nie Tian to actually dare to reprimand Xiao Luyang in front of his face? What was strange was that Xiao Luyang actually didn't dare to have an extreme reaction. "Mr. Nie, don't be angry. I can get up by myself," Lan Bingxian said softly and tried her best to prop up her body, but her body only got up halfway, and her forehead was already dripping with sweat. She was too weak, like a broken leaf in the wind. A light blow would cause her to fall. Nie Tian, who was watching from the side, lightly shook his head and then shot a glance at Zhang Yifeng. Only then did the latter react, mustered up 120% of his courage, and finally carried Lan Bingxian up. Nie Tian asked Zhang Yifeng to place Lan Bingxian in the hall, while he looted all of the herbs in the room. These herbs were fatal to Lan Bingxian, but to Nie Tian, they were good things. Of course, he couldn't let them go to waste. Nie Tian walked out of the room and said to Xiao Luyang cold, "Master Xiao, I'm going to treat the princess now. Please leave." Xiao Luyang was startled for a moment, but in the end, he still turned around and left. Nie Tian didn't waste any more time and took out several kinds of poisonous herbs from his space ring. Nie Tian opened his palm and circulated the 9 heavenly fire art, and a ball of crimson red flames appeared on his palm. Zhang Yifeng, who was watching from the side, was dumbstruck. He never thought that there would actually be such a miraculous fire control art in the world, completely without the help of external forces. Just relying on one's own yuan power to produce flames, it was really too unimaginable. Nie Tian's whole body was focused, and he carefully refined each kind of herb, and then put them into a medicine bottle. This process seemed simple, but it consumed a huge amount of mental energy. Moreover, what Nie Tian refined were extremely poisonous herbs, and he needed to use his heart to sense the changes in the attributes of the herbs. The slightest carelessness during the whole process could cause the herbs to explode, and that would be terrible. After a moment, Nie Tian refined all the herbs, put the medicinal liquid into a medicine bottle, and handed it to Zhang Yifeng. Nie Tian instructed, "These medicines are for Her Highness's medicinal bath, 1 drop at a time, 3 times a day. After 5 days, Her Highness's body will improve." "Thank you, Master." Zhang Yifeng was extremely excited and hurriedly bowed to express his thanks. Nie Tian nodded and said, "Later, I will teach you the next treatment method, and from now on, Her Highness's illness will be taught to you. As for that Xiao outside, it's better to let him not get involved." "Yes." Zhang Yifeng bowed in response. Nie Tian faintly smiled, but in his heart, he felt that it was a pity. Lan Bingxian originally had the 10,000 poison body, and could be considered a good spiritual body of heaven and earth. Unfortunately, it had been delayed for too long, and her yuan meridians were severely damaged, so she could only slowly recuperate. In the future, Lan Bingshuan's martial Dao achievements would not be too high, but they would not be too low either. Next, Zhang Yifeng helped the princess with a medicinal bath. Because the palace maids could not approach Lan Bingxian, Zhang Yifeng could only do it himself. Zhang Yifeng immediately returned after making arrangements for Lan Bingxian. Nie Tian gave all the herbs he bought from the black market to Zhang Yifeng, and at the same time gave him a list and said, "I have written down all the pill recipes for Her Highness's treatment. You only need to follow the pill recipes and proceed step by step. In a month's time, Her Highness's body will recover to the standard of a normal person." Next, Nie Tian told Zhang Yifeng about some of the taboos of the 10,000 poison body and had the latter memorize them one by one. After doing all this, Nie Tian said something to Zhang Yifeng and then left the palace with Nie Yuro. The palace gave Nie Tian an oppressive feeling, and he did not want to stay in this kind of place for even a moment longer. After leaving the palace, Nie Tian immediately returned to the Jin residence. After meeting with Jin Debao and the others, Nie Tian personally checked on Qiu Shan's injuries, and after confirming that the latter's life was not in danger, he felt relieved. After today's matter, Nie Tian realized the importance of strength. Chapter 118. Imperial Palace, a secret place. Mother, I know that Mother dotes on me the most. Please beg Martial Uncle to personally kill that little bastard. Nie Tian. Lan Binji knelt in front of a green-robed woman and begged with tears and snot flowing down his face. Lan Binji already knew that Nie Tian was not dead and had once again escaped from Tang Yuyu's hands. Not only that, Nie Tian had also forced Qin Yetian to hand over Nie Yuro. Qin Yetian even had to kill Qin Yulong and make him a scapegoat. Tang Yuyu had failed again. This was something that Lan Binji had never expected. Tang Yuyu was known as the #1 assassin of the Bloodbat sect. Those who had died in her hands were all experts who were much stronger than Nie Tian. However, Tang Yuyu was able to complete the mission perfectly every time. But against Nie Tian, who was only at the origin spirit realm, Tang Yuyu had failed twice. This was really incomprehensible. The green-robed woman was noble and beautiful. Her body was covered in a faint green glow. Her body moved slightly, and a cold aura instantly filled the air. She was Lan Binji's mother, the empress of the Blue Cloud Empire and Qin Yetian's sister, Qinya. Binji, get up. There's no need to put on such a pitiful show in front of Mother. Qinya smiled faintly. A hint of impatience appeared on her charming face. Her sharp eyes stared at Lan Binji, as if she could see through the latter. She knew her own son very well. Qinya knew better than anyone what kind of person Lan Binji was. Originally, there was no deep hatred between Lan Binji and Nie Tian. It was only because of Lan Binji's jealousy that things developed to this point. Of course, Qinya had long since heard about Nie Tian. She was also very curious about what kind of young man Nie Tian was. Not only was he able to defeat Lan Binji, but he was also able to convince an alchemist like Zhang Yifeng to become his disciple in name. She even knew about Lan Bingqian's visit to Nie Tian. Actually, these things weren't enough for Qinya to pay attention to Nie Tian. What really bothered her was that Nie Tian could actually cure Lan Bingqian. Lan Bingqian had a very high position in Lan Yunhai's heart. If she recovered, it wouldn't be a good thing for Lan Binji. After all, Lan Bingqian was Lan Bingqian's twin sister. Qinya's expression gradually became gloomy as she carefully thought about this series of events. Mother, do you agree? Let Uncle Master make a move. He'll definitely be able to kill that little bastard. Lan Binji couldn't help but smile when she felt Qinya's cold, killing intent. The martial uncle that Lan Binji mentioned was the Bloodbat sect master. Because Qinya was the junior sister of the Bloodbat sect leader, Lan Binji addressed her as martial uncle. Bingyi, I already know what happened to Nie Tian. You should go back. Mother is a little tired. Qinya's gaze was strange as she looked towards a dark corner. Soon after, she stretched her body slightly, revealing a faint fatigue. Yes, This child will take his leave. Lon Binji stood up and bowed as he left. An undisguised, cold smile hung on the corner of his mouth. Senior brother, I know you're here. Come out. After Lon Binji left, Chinya suddenly stood up in excitement. Her voice was slightly trembling, and her face was slightly red. Junior's sister. Immediately after, a cold and deep voice sounded. It was as thin as gossamer, like a death knell from hell. In a dark corner, a burly figure in a black robe appeared. He seemed to have no legs as he floated over. Senior brother. Chinya was a little excited when she saw the man in the black robe. The man in the black robe's reaction was indifferent. He nodded slightly and stared at the darkness in front of him like a cold stone. The man in the black robe was none other than Chinya's senior brother, the Bloodbat sect leader, Gao Jin. Senior brother, Binji failed. The newcomer king of Tyrant Cloud Academy was snatched away by a youth called Nie Tian, Chinya said. I already know about the matter. Gao Jin's gloomy voice sounded. Nie Tian is indeed an unexpected factor. I'm really surprised that he could escape from Tang Yuyu's hands. Then what should we do next? Chinya asked. Originally, Chinya let Lon Binji participate in Tyrant Cloud Academy's freshman martial meet in order to raise Lon Binji's reputation, and then let him compete for the position of Crown Prince. She really didn't expect that all her plans would be disrupted by Nie Tian. Now, not only did Lon Binji's reputation not increase, it was also not as good as before. Even Lon Yinhai had some complaints about Lon Binji. Gao Jin thought for a moment and said, Nie Tian is indeed a problem. We must get rid of him. However, Nie Tian is very close to the Alchemist Guild and Blue Cloud Chamber Commerce. We can't act rashly now. Right now, we just need to wait and see. There will always be a chance. Yes, I will listen to senior brother's arrangements. Chinya didn't dare to disobey Gao Jin's orders. Gao Jin smiled sinisterly. His indifferent face finally had some expression. He murmured, Nie Tian, I am really more and more curious about you. What secrets are you hiding behind your back? At the same time, Qin family. In the spacious hall, the important figures of the Qin family had already gathered. The atmosphere in the hall was oppressive and oppressive. In the middle of the hall, there was a corpse lying on the ground. It was Qin Yulong. Qin Yulong and Qin Yuhu sat at the bottom. Their faces were gloomy, and they lowered their heads in silence. Qin Yulong was dead. He died in the hands of Qin Yetian. However, this hatred was, of course, on Yetian's head. Yetian, you've gone too far. Finally, an angry voice broke the silence. The person who spoke was a middle-aged man in his 30s or 40s. He was Qin Yetian's second brother, Qin Hongtian. At the same time, Qin Hongtian was Qin Feng's father. And Qin Feng died in the hands of Yetian during the freshman martial meet. At this moment, Qin Hongtian's face was extremely gloomy. If Yetian was in front of him, he would definitely cut the latter into pieces and grind his bones into ashes. Yetian's identity is special. He has connections with various forces in Blue Cloud City. Moreover, he just cured the princess. Our Qin family can no longer afford to offend him. A powerless sigh was heard. The person who spoke was a green-clothed elder. He should be one of the older generation of the Qin family. Are we just going to let it go like this? Qin Hongtian's face was ashen. His son, Qin Feng, died in the hands of Yetian. He wanted revenge more than anyone else. Then what do you want? The green-clothed elder asked back. Qin Hongtian was speechless. He couldn't say anything. If he really had a way, he wouldn't need to vent his anger here. Enough. Stop arguing. Qin Yetian said in a deep voice. His face was gloomy. He said, this matter started because of Prince Binji. We still need to think of a way to deal with him. Our Qin family can't afford to offend Yetian. Lon Binji is a prince. He won't let Niet Tian off. Qin Yetian frowned. He suddenly remembered the time when he was in the freshman martial meet. If he had acted ruthlessly, he might have been able to kill Niet Tian. But now he had no hope at all. Not to mention that he didn't dare to attack Niet Tian in Blue Cloud City. Even if he dared, he didn't have absolute confidence. Chapter 119. 3 days later. The moon was like a silver plate, and the sky was filled with stars. Nie Tian pushed open the door and slowly walked out with a long sword in his hand. Under the moonlight, the sword gleamed coldly. Sword Absolute Heaven Slash. It has finally shown its brilliance. Nie Tian stared at the sword in his hand and smiled. After 3 days and 3 nights, Nie Tian finally refined the Star Soul Stone and successfully integrated it into the Sword Absolute Heaven Slash. The Sword Absolute Heaven Slash that had been dormant for 100 years finally showed its brilliance. The Sword Absolute Heaven Slash was originally a 9th rank Emperor weapon. After being reforged by the Star Soul Stone, although it had shown its brilliance, it was still far from being a 9th rank Emperor weapon. After all, the Star Soul Stone was only a 7th rank spiritual material. Nie Tian estimated that the power of the Sword Absolute Heaven Slash was comparable to a 3rd rank spiritual weapon. A 3rd rank spiritual weapon was already very good. At least for the current Nie Tian, it was enough. The incident of Nie Euro being robbed a few days ago still made Nie Tian's heart palpitate. He would not allow such a thing to happen a second time. Nie Tian urgently felt that he had to increase his strength as soon as possible. Strength. Only strength had the greatest authority. Only with sufficient strength could one ensure that the people around him would not be harmed. Nie Tian came to the Jin clan's martial field and prepared to test out the power of the Sword Absolute Heaven Slash. Sword Absolute Heaven Slash, my old friend, accompany me to conquer the world again. Nie Tian raised the sword in his hand and stabbed out. Instantly, dozens of sword shadows appeared in the air, dazzling and dazzling. It's been 100 years. I wonder how much of my sword cultivation I have left. Nie Tian held the Sword Absolute Heaven Slash tightly and circulated his Yuan meridians. Suddenly, the Sword Absolute Heaven Slash's blade shone brightly and instantly condensed into a terrifying sword image that was 10 meters long. The sharp light seemed to have the power to cut through everything. Sword Consummate Heaven Slash. Kill! Nie Tian bellowed as he slashed his sword down. In the next moment, sword light filled the air, along with an astonishing momentum. Boom! With a loud bang, the huge wooden pile, which was as thick as a water bucket, suddenly shattered and turned into sawdust. On the ground, there was a deep gully that was 10 meters long. Nie Tian looked at the sawdust in front of him and frowned slightly. He muttered to himself, "Looks like I'm still too weak. I can only form a 10-meter sword light at full power." 10 meters of sword light. To others, this was already an almost horrifying number. After all, Nie Tian only had 5th-level origin spirit strength. But for Nie Tian, this power was far from enough. In his previous life, when Nie Tian used his full strength, he could condense a sword light that was tens of thousands of feet long. With just a smile, he had the power to break mountains and slash the moon. That was truly terrifying. It's time to recultivate the AO sword tactics. Nie Tian smiled and began to practice the sword. Under the moonlight, the young man's figure moved agilely, one sword after another, each stronger than the last. Under this kind of boring practice, he gradually entered a state of emptiness. At this moment, in Nie Tian's eyes, apart from himself and the heaven/sword technique, nothing else existed. Proud sword tactics. The sword was proud of the sky, overlooking everything. After his rebirth, Nie Tian must comprehend the profound meaning of the AO sword tactics over and over again in order to have the opportunity to exert the AO sword tactics to the extreme. The AO sword tactics was a super AO sword tactics created by Nie Tian in his previous life by combining several kinds of heaven-class sword tactics, coupled with his own unique, profound understanding of the sword. The sword doctrine focused on comprehending the true meaning of the sword doctrine. The path of the sword doctrine was divided into 10 realms: sword moves, sword techniques, sword chi, sword heart, sword intent, sword power, sword spirit, sword soul, and sword profound. Ordinary martial artists could only stay in the realm of sword moves and sword techniques for their entire lives. Those who could condense sword chi were already considered geniuses of the sword doctrine. Those who could comprehend the sword heart and sword intent, and create their own sword power were one in a million. As for the sword spirit, sword soul, and sword soul, only real sword doctrine grandmasters could reach them. As for the 10th realm of sword profound, only monstrous geniuses at the peak of sword doctrine could have a glimpse of it. In his previous life, Nie Tian was a monstrous genius who had reached the sword profound. He created his own sword doctrine profound. Ao. Even a fanatic of the sword doctrine, like the limitless sword, Saint specially came to the Danite god realm to ask Nie Tian for advice on the sword doctrine. After his rebirth, Nie Tian's comprehension of the sword doctrine was still there. Unfortunately, the sword heart in his body was gone and needed to be nurtured again. The sword heart was the heart of a swordsman. After that, the sword intent, sword power, and sword spirit all came from the sword heart. Losing the sword heart was both a bad and a good thing for Nie Tian. The bad thing was that he had to recultivate the sword doctrine. The good thing was that he had the opportunity to comprehend different sword doctrines. Nie Tian had already comprehended the Ao sword heart in his previous life. In this life, when he recultivated the sword doctrine, he had the opportunity to comprehend different sword doctrines. If he could comprehend two kinds of sword profound at the same time, it would be enough for Nie Tian to be unrivaled in the heaven god realm with his attainments in the sword doctrine alone. At this moment, Nie Tian made endless moves over and over again in order to comprehend the mystery of the Ao sword tactics. With the sword doctrine comprehension in his previous life as a foundation, Nie Tian's cultivation of the sword doctrine progressed at a tremendous pace. 300 billion sword shadows. Nie Tian stabbed out with his sword. Suddenly, the sword shadows were overflowing in the air. A stream of light cut through the night sky, and an astonishing sword chi swept out. Nie Tian put away the sword absolute heaven slash and smiled indifferently. Very good. I have condensed the sword chi. Next, I only need to spend some time to accumulate the sword heart with the sword chi, and I can reach the sword heart realm. In just half a day, Nie Tian directly reached the sword chi realm. If others knew this, they would definitely regard him as a monster. After condensing the sword chi, Nie Tian found something strange in the sword chi. His sword chi seemed to contain two kinds of aura. One was the arrogant sword chi of the Ao sword tactics, and the other was the more overbearing and vigorous sword chi. Moreover, the two kinds of sword chi actually merged into one in a wonderful way. If it were not for Nie Tian's high understanding of the sword doctrine, he would not even be able to find this. 300 billion sword shadows. Nie Tian made another move and felt it carefully. His eyes showed surprise. This is the aura of the power of the stars. After carefully perceiving it, Nie Tian found that the other kind of sword chi was quite similar to the power of the stars. Condensing two kinds of sword chi at the same time, even Nie Tian, the ultimate genius of the sword doctrine, had never encountered such a thing. After a long while, Nie Tian could not suppress the excitement in his heart and laughed wildly. Two kinds of sword chi, which also meant that Nie Tian would nurture two sword hearts. Nurturing two sword hearts at the same time. This was absolutely unprecedented and shocking news. Previously, Nie Tian only held a glimmer of hope that he could comprehend two kinds of sword ultimacy. But now he had full confidence that he could definitely comprehend two kinds of sword ultimacy. Two kinds of sword ultimacy, Nie Tian could not help but laugh wildly. He looked up and said, Emperor Chenin, Luo Zian, you father and daughter just wait. The day when I, Nie Tian, return to the divine realm is not far away. When I return to the divine realm, it will be the day when you pay with your blood. The arrogant words swore the anger in Nie Tian's heart. He had never forgotten what Luo Chenhun and Luo Zian, father and daughter, had done to him. Chapter 120. The next morning, the sun rose, its red glow filling half the sky. Nie Tian walked out of his room. After a night's rest, he had recovered to his peak condition. Because of the primal chaos original coffin, Nie Tian only needed a short period of time to fully recover. During breakfast, Nie Tian was surprised to find that Nie Yuro was already at the 7th level of the Origin Meridian Realm. 7th level of the Origin Meridian Realm. For a 9-year-old child, this kind of strength was extremely heaven-defying. It turned out that while Nietian had been training hard, Nieyuro had also been training hard. Big brother Nietian, will definitely train hard. In the future, I will be able to protect big brother Nietian. At the dining table, Nieyuro's eyes shone like black gems as she said seriously. The little girl hugged little Guai, her face serious and determined, her expression indescribably cute. Nietian pinched Nieyuro's pink cheeks and nodded with a smile. All right. Then I will wait for the day becomes a peerless martial artist. Nieyuro nodded heavily, her expression even more serious. After breakfast, Nietian gave Nieyuro 10 Channel Awakening pills, reminding her to take one every day. Once she reached the 9th level of the Origin Meridian Realm, she would not need to eat anymore. When Nietian first refined the Channel Awakening pills, he had originally prepared them for Nieyuro. It was just that he did not have the time to give them to her. Thank you, big brother Nietian. Nieyuro carefully put away the Channel Awakening pills. She suddenly thought of something and said, Big brother Nietian, you said that if Rower becomes an essence spirit martial artist, you will give Rower a magical storage bag. Don't forget. Nietian nodded with a smile. When Rower becomes an essence spirit martial artist, I will give Ro something even better than a storage bag. Really? Nieyuro's eyes suddenly shone brightly. She was extremely happy. Of course. Nietian smiled faintly. He had plundered 2 spatial rings from the Juwan and Juqin brothers, and he could give one to Nieyuro. However, Nieyuro's current strength was too weak, and she was also too young. Nietian would not give it to her for the time being. Thank you, big brother Nietian. Don't forget, big brother Nietian. Ro will be able to become an essence spirit martial artist very soon. Nieyuro ran off happily, returning to her room alone to concentrate on her cultivation. Nietian looked at Nieyuro's small back and softly whispered, It looks like I need to find a teacher for Rower. Nieyuro's talent was not bad. If she had a suitable teacher, her future achievements would definitely not be low. Perhaps she really would have the chance to become a peerless martial artist. Nietian's tyrannical bear martial art was not suitable for Nieyuro. At this time, Nietian suddenly thought of a person who was extremely suitable to be Nieyuro's teacher. Rui Qinyu, are you willing to accept as your disciple? Nietian would definitely not randomly find a teacher for Nieyuro. Currently, the only person who could meet Nietian's expectations was Rui Qinyu. Rui Qinyu was only 20 years old, but she was already a true element martial artist. Her talent and strength did not need to be mentioned. If Rower could follow by her side, it would not be a bad choice. Following that, Nietian went to visit Xiushan. The latter's injuries were still very serious, and if he wanted to fully recover, he would still need some time. Originally, Nietian had planned to treat Xiushan's damaged Yuan meridians in a few days, but the latter had suddenly been injured, so he could only delay the treatment. Coming out from Xiushan's residence, Nietian found Jean de Bayo and prepared to make a trip to Tyrant Cloud Academy. In the following period of time, Nietian was prepared to borrow the Spirit Gathering Array and the cultivation room of Tyrant Cloud Academy to cultivate. Of course, he did not forget the 1-month appointment with Rui Qinyu. In 1 month's time, Nietian had to reach the strength of a manifestation martial artist. Entering Tyrant Cloud Academy, Nietian and Jean de Bayo went straight to the cultivation room. Along the way, many people recognized Nietian and did not conceal their admiration for him. There were also many people who took the initiative to jump out and greet him. However, Nietian paid no attention to any of them. Boss, we've arrived at the cultivation room. Soon, the two of them arrived at the cultivation room of Tyrant Cloud Academy. Jean de Bayo pointed to the rows of small arrays in front of them and said, The cultivation room was a small room with a powerful spirit gathering array around it. It could condense heaven and earth spiritual energy and help martial artists cultivate faster. 3rd grade spirit gathering array, not bad. Nietian only glanced at it, and immediately saw that the spirit-gathering array in front of him was a third-grade array. It could make the heaven and earth spiritual energy inside the array 3 times denser than outside. 3 times denser heaven and earth spiritual energy could basically increase a martial artist's cultivation speed by 3 times. This was a very terrifying concept. Under the accumulation of days and months, it was enough to make the disparity between martial artists produce an earth-shattering change. Nietian was already a student of Tyrant Cloud Academy now, but he naturally did not have the slightest interest in teacher Tyrant Cloud's lectures. Moreover, if not for the urgency of time, he would not use such a trashy spirit-gathering array either. Although the current Nietian's mental power dropped to only Tier 40, he could also set up a Tier 4 spirit-gathering array. It was just that the setting up of the spirit-gathering array was very complicated. Furthermore, Nietian did not have the place and spiritual materials to set up the array. Hence, he could only make do with borrowing Tyrant Cloud Academy's array. "Boss, let's hurry up. Otherwise, the cultivation room will be occupied by people." Jean de Bao was somewhat excited as he said with a chuckle. Nietian said frankly, "I'm the newcomer king. I should have the priority to use the cultivation room." Jean de Bao chuckled and said, "That's the case, but the actual situation is not like that." Nietian frowned slightly, not quite understanding what Jean de Bao meant. "Yo, isn't this young Master Jean? What wind blew you here?" Right at this time, a voice full of ridicule sounded out. Several youths in fine clothes appeared, arrogantly blocking Nietian and Jean de Bao's path. Senior apprentice Brother Liang. When Jean de Bao saw the appearance of the person who spoke clearly, he immediately laughed dryly twice and said, "Me and my boss came to the cultivation room to cultivate." "What a coincidence! Senior apprentice Brother Liang is here too." "Boss." That youth who was addressed as Senior Apprentice Brother Liang by Jean de Bao raised his brows. Shooting a glance at Nietian, he snorted coldly and said, "Bullsh asterisk T-boss. Here, Liang Yunfeng am the boss." Liang Yunfeng's words were immediately seconded by the lackeys behind him. "Yeah, Jean de Bao, you drank cat piss and became muddle-headed, right? Why don't you look at what kind of trash the people around you are? Boss, even if he were to be number 2 for your father wouldn't want him. That's right. Isn't it just a puny little newcomer king? He can only throw his weight around in the outer court. Want to call himself boss in front of us? Inner court disciples? Far from it. Pooh, a mere essence spirit martial artist. Why don't you take a piss and look at yourself in the mirror? Your hair isn't even fully grown yet, and you're already trying to be the boss. You probably won't even know how you die in the future." The mocking voices were each more ear-piercing than the last. Nietian had heard Jean de Bao mention before that Tyrant Cloud Academy had outer court disciples and inner court disciples. Only martial artists whose cultivation reached the manifestation realm could enter the inner court. Without a doubt, these few people in front of him were Tyrant Cloud Academy's inner court disciples. Nietian swept a glance over the few people in front of him. Apart from Liang Yunfeng, who had the strength of 3rd-level manifestation realm, the rest were all 1st-level manifestation realm. Chapter 121. Scram. Nietian glared at Liang Yunfeng coldly. He didn't want to waste any more words and roared. He didn't have much time to waste with a bunch of idiots. If these idiots didn't open their eyes, he didn't mind teaching them a lesson. Liang Yunfeng's eyes turned cold, and his whole body released an undisguised chill. Jean de Bao swallowed his saliva and whispered to Nietian, "Boss, he is an inner court disciple. He was ordered by the academy to manage the training grounds." Jean de Bao stole a glance at Liang Yunfeng and whispered, "Liang Yunfeng is Liang Yunlong's elder brother. He obviously wants to avenge his younger brother." "Oh." Nietian smiled playfully and stared at Liang Yunfeng. No wonder he looked so familiar. Liang Yunlong was defeated by Nietian in one move during the freshman martial meet. Not only was he seriously injured, but even his Yuan burst pill was snatched away by Nietian. Liang Yunlong being beaten up was a small matter, but the Liang family lost face because of it. The Liang family was considered one of the big families in Blue Cloud City. Their disciple was defeated in front of everyone and robbed. Of course, they couldn't swallow this, especially Liang Yunfeng, who had been waiting for Nie Tian to appear. Unfortunately, Nie Tian had been recovering for the past few days. Yesterday, he had been delayed by Nie Yuro's matter. Today was his first time coming to Tyrant Cloud Academy. Liang Yunfeng was in charge of managing the training grounds. How could he let Nie Tian off when he met him in his territory? That's right. Liang Yunlong roared and said without hesitation, I am Liang Yunlong's elder brother. You injured my younger brother, so I will avenge him today. Nie Tian was the newcomer king and Zhang Yifeng's teacher. He was in the limelight in Blue Cloud City. Liang Yunfeng naturally didn't dare to kill Nie Tian, but he still had to teach him a lesson. With just you? Nie Tianling sneered, and a strange smile appeared on his face. The battle between Nie Tian and Liang Yunlong was supposed to be a fair fight. Life and death were up to fate. Moreover, it was Liang Yunlong who provoked him first. If Nie Tian was a little weaker, he might not even be alive today. Liang Yunfeng seeking revenge for Liang Yunlong with such great fanfare was simply making trouble for no reason. More than enough to teach you a lesson. Liang Yufeng clenched his fists so tightly that cracking sounds could be heard. A tyrannical aura had already exploded out, causing the expressions of the surrounding onlookers to change. Brother Feng, there's no need to use a sledgehammer to kill a chicken. I, Zhao Ho, am enough to deal with this puny origin spirit stage trash. Before Liang Yufeng could make a move, a skinny young man with a protruding mouth and monkey cheeks jumped out from behind him. His small eyes looked as if he had not woken up yet as he shouted arrogantly. These inner court disciples had all heard of Nie Tian's great name. Unfortunately, not many of them had actually seen him fight. As for Nie Tian defeating Lan Binji and going against Qin Yetian, they all thought that it was just an exaggeration. No one believed that an essence spirit martial artist could fight against a giant spirit martial artist. Hiss. Zhao Ho let out a strange laugh and immediately made a move with lightning speed. Zhao Ho clenched his hand into a claw, and a sharp white bone claw instantly appeared in the air. With a shrill whistle, it struck towards Nie Tian's neck. Zhao Ho's attack was ruthless and decisive. He aimed at Nie Tian's vital point the moment he made a move. If this claw hit Nie Tian, he would either die or be seriously injured. Nie Tian did not panic. His body only shook slightly, and a sharp sword aura whizzed out. In the next moment, accompanied by a miserable howl like a pig being slaughtered, Zhao Ho's 5 fingers flew into the air and drew several lines of blood. Sword aura. Sharp sword aura. Nie Tian did not even draw his sword. Just relying on the murderous sword aura, he easily cut off Zhao Ho's 5 fingers. The scene that entered everyone's eyes shocked them. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air at the same time. Looking at Nie Tian, who did not move at all, they felt their tailbones turn cold. My fingers! Zhao Ho cried out in pain and picked up the fingers on the ground while trembling. But when he wanted to pick up the last finger, he was stepped on by a foot. Nie Tian exerted force with his foot, and the finger was stepped on into meat paste. You? Zhao Ho raised his head in shock. He was so scared that he trembled. The finger that he picked up with great difficulty fell onto the ground again. Nie Tianling said coldly, losing one finger. Take it as a lesson for you. Next time, don't offend those people that you don't understand. Zhao Ho looked at Nie Tian in fear. He hurriedly picked up the other fingers and ran away as fast as he could, looking for someone to help him connect his fingers. Nie Tian slightly raised his head, looked at Liang Yunfeng, and said indifferently, Your dog was beaten away. Now it's your turn. Didn't you want to teach me a lesson? I'll give you a chance now. Make you move. Only now did Liang Yunfeng walk out from his shock. Everything that happened just now was too strange. It was simply unimaginable. The few people behind Liang Yunfeng were all scared to the point that their faces turned deathly white. They were rejoicing in their hearts. Luckily, the person who attacked Nie Tian just now was not me. Under everyone's gaze, Liang Yunfeng was really too embarrassed to admit defeat. he mustered up the greatest courage he had in his entire life and said fiercely, "Stinking brat, since you are seeking death, I will fulfill your wish." Before he finished speaking, Liang Yunfeng immediately made his move. Swish! A golden blade appeared in the air. The blade was over a meter long and emitted a terrifying aura as it struck down towards Nye Tian. "Boss, be careful!" Jean de Bayo cried out in shock and couldn't help but retreat. Nye Tian was already prepared for Liang Yunfeng's move. This time, he only slightly leaned his body to the side and dodged Liang Yunfeng's blade. At the same time, he condensed his finger into a sword and pointed out with his finger. A whistling sound came from the air, and an astonishing sword chi gushed out. Dang! As if gold and stone collided, a loud sound rang out. The sword chi struck on the golden blade. Liang Yunfeng immediately felt a tremendous force ripple out. His wrist went numb right after, and a bloody wound actually tore open between his thumb and forefinger. The golden blade shattered right away. Liang Yunfeng cried out miserably and retreated several steps, a mouthful of fresh blood spurting out wildly. The entire place fell silent once more. It was so quiet that even a needle dropping could be heard. Even breathing sounds could be heard clearly. Nobody could have thought that Liang Yunfeng would actually be defeated by Nye Tian in one move. What made people most unable to accept was that Nye Tian did not even take out his weapon, let alone use his primordial spirit. Jean de Bayo was also dumbfounded. Several days ago, wasn't Nye Tian still at the same level as Lan Binji? Now, he was actually able to utterly crush Liang Yunlong. This kind of improvement speed was too monstrous. Nye Tian was currently 5th level essence spirit strength. Compared to several days ago, the greatest difference was that he awakened the power of 32 stars and condensed 2 kinds of sword chi. The most terrifying thing was that Nye Tian's sword chi could unleash the might of the power of stars to the extreme. Compared to fists and palms, its might was several times stronger. The current Nye Tian, even if he did not use his star souls, could still completely crush any martial artist below 5th level Wanxian. Liang Yunfeng held his injured wrist with one hand, his eyes filled with hatred as he stared fixedly at Nye Tian, as if he wanted to skin the latter alive. "Let's go." Nye Tian did not even look at Liang Yunfeng as he directly strode into the training grounds. This was Tyrant Cloud Academy. Nye Tian did not wish to kill anyone. Liang Yunfeng stared at Nye Tian's back, his eyes filled with venom. Chapter 122. Boss. Jean de Bayo's reaction was very fast. He shouted and stood up to block the saber for Nye Tian. Jean de Bayo had the primordial spirit of the God-Fiend Blood Scroll, so his reaction at close range was even sharper than Nye Tian's. "You're courting death." Nye Tian seemed to have expected Liang Yunfeng's move. He roared lung, and another sharp sword chi gushed out. Puff! The sword chi swept past, and Liang Yunfeng's arm was directly cut off. Bang! At the same time, the golden saber slashed Jean de Bayo's back. The latter fell to the ground, but he was unharmed. Nye Tian knew that Jean de Bayo was wearing the golden thunder armor, so he was at ease to let the latter block the saber for him. The golden thunder armor was naturally returned to the Jean family by the Qin family. Nye Tian was very puzzled. What exactly was Jean de Bayo's primordial spirit? How could it be so sharp? Nye Tian was able to react in an instant because he could see that Liang Yunfeng wouldn't stop, so he waited for Liang Yunfeng to make a move. Jean de Bayo, on the other hand, reacted immediately. His keen perception was even stronger than Nye Tian's. "Ah, my arm." After a short moment of astonishment, Liang Yunfeng suddenly felt a bone-piercing pain and immediately wailed like a ghost. Nye Tianling looked at Liang Yunfeng coldly and said, "Liang Yunfeng, you're really hateful to stab someone in the back. This is a lesson for you. Don't let me see you again next time." After saying that, Nye Tian turned and walked into the training field, leaving Liang Yunfeng howling in pain on the ground. Liang Yunfeng attacked Nye Tian from behind, but Nye Tian didn't kill him and only cut off one of his arms, which was already very merciful. If they weren't in Tyrant Cloud Academy at the moment, Nie Tian would never show mercy to Liang Yinfeng. After all, Liang Yinfeng was an inner court disciple of Tyrant Cloud Academy, and he was also the person in charge of the training field. If he was killed in the training field, it would be really troublesome. Liang Yinfeng was still alive, and there were so many witnesses that he was the one who provoked him. So even if the academy was involved, Qi Feng would definitely be able to protect Nie Tian. Nie Tian would not stay in the Domineering Cloud Academy for too long. After a month, he would return from his cultivation with Rainy Qianye, and then he would start dealing with the Bloodbat sect. Once the Bloodbat sect was eradicated, Tian would leave Tyrant sect and leave the Blue Cloud Empire and go to a wider world. At least, that was his plan. However, he didn't know. When Nie Tian and Jean de Bayo arrived at the cultivation field, they saw that the first few rows of cultivation rooms were already occupied. De Bayo, Nie Tian, and de Bayo. De Bayo, Jean, Tian de Bayo, Dan, Tian de Bayo. What? Nie Dong. What? De Bayo hesitated for a moment before saying, "Boss, the 20 training rooms in this row are for the top 20 in the inner court. Others can't enter." Nie Tian was stunned for a moment before he smiled. "Is this a rule of Tyrant Cloud Academy?" "No." Jean de Bayo shook his head. Seeing Jean de Bayo hesitating, Nie Tian immediately understood. Since it wasn't a rule of the academy, it was obvious that the top 20 disciples in the inner court had used their strength to forcibly occupy the training rooms. Jean de Bayo was afraid that Nie Tian would force his way into the training rooms, so he didn't dare to say it. Even when they're not around, no one is allowed to enter these 20 training rooms, right? Nie Tian asked directly. Yes. A worried look appeared on Jean de Bayo's face, but he still nodded. When overbearing top 20 disciple, Nie Tian smiled faintly. Without hesitation, he turned and was about to enter an empty training room in front of him. "Who allowed you to enter?" Scram! Just as Nie Tian stepped into the training room, an ear-piercing roar came from behind him. Nie Tian frowned slightly. He turned and saw a young man in luxurious clothes glaring at him angrily. The young man in luxurious clothes was about 15 or 16 years old. He had sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes, and a handsome face. He gave off a very cold and sharp feeling. Nie Tian looked at the young man in luxurious clothes in front of him and was slightly shocked. He felt an unusual aura from the young man. Sword Chi. The young man carried a long sword on his back. It was obvious that he was a swordsman. Interesting. This guy is actually a martial artist who specializes in sword Dao. Nie Tian's lips curled up slightly, revealing a rather playful smile. At this moment, the surrounding people recognized the identity of the young man in luxurious clothes and were all shocked. He is Shang Mingjie, a disciple of Sword Dao aristocratic family, Shang family. Shang family is the only Sword Dao aristocratic family in Blue Cloud Empire. Everyone in Shang family is devoted to Sword Dao. I heard that the family has an advanced yellow tier sword technique. I wonder if it's true. Advanced yellow tier sword technique. Really? It should be true. Look at Shang Mingjie. He's only 16 years old, and he entered the Inner Institute last year. He only used a year to become one of the top 20 disciples in the Inner Institute. How terrifying. Nie Tian looked at Shang Mingjie and thought to himself, condensing sword chi at 16 years old. His talent in Sword Dao can barely be considered trash. His strength is at the 3rd tier of the manifestation realm, and he has condensed sword chi. No wonder he can enter the top 20 of the Inner Institute. Sword techniques, sword arts, and sword chi. Every level of Sword Dao was like an insurmountable mountain. The vast majority of people in the world stopped at the stage of sword techniques and sword arts. Only an extremely small portion of people could condense sword chi. Precisely because of this, there were very few martial artists who specialized in Sword Dao. Shang Mingjie was able to condense sword chi at 16 years old. His talent in Sword Dao couldn't be considered trash. However, compared to Nie Tian, this talent was not just a little bit inferior. Rather, it was tens of thousands of times worse. This was because Nie Tian had only used half a day's time to condense sword chi. Moreover, he had condensed 2 types of sword chi. This cultivation room isn't for you to enter. Get lost. Shang Mingjie glanced at Nie Tian, his tone full of arrogance. Nie Tian smiled playfully and said, "What if I insist on entering?" He was the newcomer king. According to the rules of the academy, he had the right to use all cultivation resources first. Not to mention that the cultivation room in front of him was empty right now. Even if there were people inside, he could let them out. Shang Mingjie was slightly startled. He took a step forward and said coldly with a threatening aura, "This is His Highness Benji's cultivation room. If you insist on entering, then you're courting death." What a coincidence. The cultivation room that Nie Tian wanted to enter was Lan Benji's cultivation room. Although Lan Benji wasn't in the top 20 of the Inner Institute, he was a prince, so he was treated as one of the top 20. Also, looking at Shang Mingjie's posture, he was obviously Lan Benji's lackey. Haha. Nie Tian laughed and didn't dodge. He said, "What a coincidence. I like to court death. It's a pity that I haven't met anyone who can kill me yet." If this was someone else's cultivation room, Shang Mingjie would persuade him nicely, and Nie Tian would have a trace of possibility to give up. But this was Lan Benji's cultivation room. Nie Tian had to enter. Is that so? Shang Mingjie's eyes turned cold. The longsword on his back let out a low sword cry. He was considered a top figure in Tyrant Cloud Academy. There had never been anyone who dared to speak in front of him like this. Shang Mingjie felt that his prestige was being questioned. Chapter 123. Boss. Sensing Shang Mingjie's anger, Jean de Bao tugged at Nie Tian, reminding him not to be too arrogant. Shang Mingjie was the inner court's top 20 disciples, far from what people like Liang Yinfeng could compare to. What worried Jean de Bao even more was that Shang Mingjie was already Lan Benji's man. Nie Tian and Lan Benji were originally already incompatible like fire and water. Under such circumstances, it was better not to take the initiative to provoke Lan Benji. What worried Jean de Bao even more was that Shang Mingjie's big brother, Shang Mingyu, was the inner court's #1 powerhouse. Even if Nie Tian could beat Shang Mingjie, he definitely could not be Shang Mingyu's match. Yes, Nie Tian completely ignored Jean de Bao's reminder. Looking at the already enraged Shang Mingjie, he smiled faintly and said, "Make your move. If I guess correctly, your sword chi was condensed half a year ago. Coincidentally, I also condensed sword chi accidentally last night. Let me see whose sword chi is stronger." "Boss, you condensed sword chi." Nie Tian's words made Jean de Bao dumbfounded, his fat face making an extremely exaggerated pose. In Jean de Bao's eyes, Nie Tian's talent was already needless to say. Not only was his martial arts talent heaven-defying, but he was also an alchemist. He also seemed to know a lot about spiritual materials. He even had some research on spirit arrays. Now, Nie Tian actually condensed sword chi again. This really became a decathlon. The surrounding people also looked at Nie Tian in shock, their faces full of disbelief. Sword chi, how could it be condensed so easily? So many martial artists flinched at the sight of the path of the sword because the path of the sword was too arduous. The requirements for sword Dao talent were very high. It was not something that ordinary people could hope for. If sword chi was so easy to condense, then everyone would be a sword Dao grandmaster. Most people felt that Nie Tian must be lying, deliberately scaring Shang Mingjie and making the latter retreat. This kind of intimidation was too childish. Shang Mingjie was also not a 3-year-old kid. "You really condensed sword chi?" Others didn't believe Nie Tian's words, but that didn't mean that Shang Mingjie didn't believe him. He carefully sensed Nie Tian's aura, and indeed, he sensed a strong sword chi. "I just condensed it by accident." Nie Tian smiled faintly, speaking as if condensing sword chi was as easy as eating and drinking. His action successfully angered Shang Mingjie's weak little heart. Shang Mingjie thought that Nie Tian was insulting him, mocking his sword Dao talent for being trash. Actually, there was no need for Nie Tian to mock him. His talent was trash to begin with. What a good accidentally. Let me see whether or not you will accidentally die. Shang Mingjie shouted angrily. and the long sword on his back was unsheathed. The sharp cry of his sword could almost pierce one's eardrums. Your sword is not good enough. You should use your origin spirit. Nietian smiled faintly, not panicking in the slightest. He had long seen that Shang Mingjie's origin spirit was a sword spirit. Although the long sword on his back was not bad, and was already a rank 2 spiritual weapon, it was a pity that its power was far from being as strong as an origin spirit. Arrogant, Shang Mingjie was instantly angered, and no longer had any scruples. He took out his long sword and stabbed out. Instantly, a sharp sword chi pierced through the air and suddenly attacked Nietian. The surrounding crowd let out a cry of surprise and retreated, afraid of being caught in the crossfire. Nietian did not move and did not even take out his sword Absolute Heaven Slash. He only condensed his fingers into a sword, and instantly, a sword chi shot out from his fingertips. Pooh! The sword chi collided with the sword chi, but only a slight shattering sound was heard. Everyone did not know what had happened, and then in the next moment, dang! A crisp sound rang out. The long sword in Shang Mingjie's hand suddenly trembled, and a strange force transmitted to his wrist, causing the webbing between his thumb and forefinger to suddenly ache. Instantly, the long sword fell to the ground with a clang. Shang Mingjie also suffered the impact of the strange force, retreating several steps, and even almost falling down. This impossible! Shang Mingjie looked at Niet Tian furiously, completely unable to believe the scene before his eyes. The other party was clearly only at the 5th level origin spirit realm. How was it possible that he did not even draw his sword, and just relied on a wisp of sword chi to force him into such a sorry state? Shang Mingjie was not the only one who could not figure it out. The gazes of the surrounding people, when looking at Niet Tian, all became astonishment and shock. At the same time, carried deep fear. Boss actually forced Shang Mingjie back without drawing his sword? Jean de Bao's throat made a gulping sound. His mouth opened so wide that an egg could practically be stuffed in. The disparity between Shang Mingjie and Niet Tian was not the disparity in cultivation, but the disparity in sword Dao comprehension and sword chi. Although Niet Tian's sword Dao realm was only at the sword chi realm, his sword Dao comprehension was at the peak monstrous level. Forget about an ant like Shang Mingjie. Even in the entire heaven realm's divine realm, those who could stand shoulder to shoulder with Niet Tian and sword Dao were also scarce. Another point was that Shang Mingjie's sword chi and Niet Tian's sword chi were also very far apart. How could the sword chi condensed from the proud sword art and the sword chi produced from the star origin stone be comparable to the sword chi condensed from a high-grade yellow rank sword art? I said before, your sword is too lousy. Better use your origin spirit. Niet Tian looked at Shang Mingjie, who was as shocked as a grasshopper, and smiled calmly. Shang Mingjie's sword was indeed very lousy, only a tier 2 spirit artifact. It was even inferior to Niet Tian's sword Absolute Heaven Slash. Although the sword Absolute Heaven Slash was far from recovering to the level of a tier 9 Emperor artifact, it was already comparable to a tier 3 spirit artifact. If Niet Tian used his sword at this moment, Shang Mingjie would already be a corpse. Shang Mingjie reacted and almost flew into a rage as he roared, "Little bastard, you asked for this." Shang Mingjie did not know who Niet Tian was at all, but because the latter had angered him, he directly had the intention to kill him. Swish! With a furious roar, a cyan longsword appeared behind Shang Mingjie, suffused with a faint silver light. The sword aura spread out 3 feet, causing people's hearts to palpitate. It's really the sword's spirit. Everyone gasped. Shang Mingjie is angry, he wants to kill. Everyone couldn't help but retreat. Niet Tian was also slightly stunned. He did not expect Shang Mingjie to be so overbearing. Just like this, he really wanted to kill. Such a narrow-minded swordsman was destined to be unable to achieve the supreme sword Dao. Even if he could nurture a sword heart in the future, his sword heart would definitely not be pure, and it would be easy for him to go berserk. Such a narrow-minded swordsman, I will destroy your sword chi, so that you won't hurt others in the future, Niet Tian said in a deep voice, emitting an extremely domineering aura. "You are courting death." Seeing that Nye Tian did not even put him in his eyes, Shang Mingjie was even more furious. The cyan long sword on his back slashed through the air and landed in his hand. Sword Absolute Heaven Slash also appeared in Nye Tian's hand. He did not want to give Shang Mingjie any chance. Green Lotus Slash. Shang Mingjie shouted, almost shouting out the eunuch's movement. His entire body was bursting with origin energy, and the cyan long sword shone brightly, enveloping his entire body. The sword light was shocking, condensing into a terrifying sword wave in the air, rolling with boundless killing intent, directly attacking. 300 billion sword shadows. Nye Tian's figure did not move, and he only stabbed out with his sword. Suddenly, hundreds of sword lights appeared in the air, covering the sky and covering the earth. Chapter 124. Bang! There was a loud noise in the air, and the sword shadow collided with the sword wave. All of Shang Mingjie's sword chi was useless in front of Nye Tian. "Ah!" Shang Mingjie screamed as the sword shadow attacked him. His eyes were instantly replaced by extreme fear. Shang Mingjie was directly hit by the sword shadow. When his figure was still in the air, he spat out blood, and his face showed a painful expression. After landing, Shang Mingjie couldn't get up for a long time. His face became extremely miserable. Finally, he burst into tears. Being defeated by Nye Tian was not enough to make Shang Mingjie cry. What made him cry was that Nye Tian destroyed his sword chi with one move. Sword chi. That was the sword chi that he had spent more than 10 years to condense. Now it was destroyed by one move. How could Shang Mingjie bear such a blow? Nye Tian destroyed Shang Mingjie's sword chi with one move. What he used was the move of AO Sword Tactics, 300 billion sword shadows. AO Sword Tactics had 3 basic moves, 3 intermediate moves, 3 advanced moves, and 3 supreme moves. In addition, it also included various sword formations. 300 billion sword shadows was one of the 3 basic moves of AO Sword Tactics. The other 2 moves were 17 swords and 1 sword overturning the night. Now Nye Tian was too weak, and he could only use the 3 basic moves of AO Sword Tactics. Among the 3 basic moves, 17 swords was a defensive move and the only defensive move in AO Sword Tactics. 300 billion sword shadows and 1 sword overturning the night were both offensive moves. 300 billion sword shadows, as the name suggested, when practiced to the extreme, 1 sword could stab out 300 billion flowing light sword shadows, which really had the power to destroy heaven and earth. It was a pity that Nye Tian could only stab out hundreds of flowing light sword shadows with 1 sword. The gap between Shang Mingjie and Nye Tian was too big, mainly in sword chi, sword moves, and sword comprehension. Nye Tian's sword comprehension was much better than Shang Mingjie's. Even if Nye Tian only used ordinary sword moves at the moment, it was enough to defeat Shang Mingjie. Shang Mingjie was defeated by Nye Tian with 1 move and had no power to fight back. This scene completely stunned everyone, and Shang Mingjie's crying made everyone even more confused. Wasn't he just defeated? Was there a need to cry in public? "Boss, why is he crying?" Jean de Bao couldn't help but ask when he saw Shang Mingjie crying. Nye Tian shook his head slightly and said, "I accidentally destroyed his sword chi." He couldn't accept this fact, so he cried. One careless mistake, another careless mistake. When Shang Mingjie heard the words accidentally again, he cried even louder. This time, even his mother couldn't coax him. Nye Tian no longer looked at Shang Mingjie. Instead, he looked at the cultivation room beside him and said with a smile, "De Bao, Shang Mingjie's sword chi has already been crippled, so he probably won't be interested in the cultivation room anymore. From now on, his cultivation room will be yours." "Boss, this..." Hearing what Nye Tian said, not only was Jean de Bao not happy, he was instead quite frightened, and his tongue was almost unable to straighten. "You don't want it?" Nye Tian was slightly stunned. Jean de Bao bent down beside Nye Tian's ear and said softly, "Boss, Shang Mingjia's big brother is the #1 expert in the inner courtyard, Shang Mingyu. It is said that his strength is very strong, and many teachers in the academy can't compare to him. Since you crippled Shang Mingjia, Shang Mingyu definitely won't let this matter go. Let's leave first. Oh, Nye Tian was a little surprised, then laughed. Why do we have to leave? The sword chi that I accidentally condensed has yet to find an opponent. If Shang Mingyu comes, he can test out the extent of my sword chi. Shang Mingyu. Hearing this name coming out from Nye Tian's mouth, the surrounding people were quite surprised and started discussing. Nye Tian knows that Shang Mingjia is Shang Mingyu's little brother and still dared to cripple his sword chi. Is he tired of living? That's right. Shang Mingyu is not someone that Shang Mingjia can compare to. He is the #1 in the inner courtyard. It is said that many teachers aren't his opponent. I heard that Shang Mingyu is in closed-door training during this period of time. I heard that he is trying to nurture his sword heart. Sword heart. Tyrant Cloud Academy hasn't produced a swordsman with sword heart, right? At this time, Shang Mingjia also thought of something, and it was unknown where he got the strength to stand up, but he pointed at Nye Tian and roared, "Little bastard, just you wait. My big brother is in closed-door training, and when he finishes, he will definitely take your dog life." Shang Mingyu was indeed in closed-door training, and he wasn't in Tyrant Cloud Academy at this time. Nye Tian chuckled and said, "You clearly know that Shang Mingyu is in closed-door training, and you still dare to be so arrogant? Do you believe that I won't kill you right now?" After saying that, Nye Tian's eyes shot out a beam of light, and his whole body released a sharp, killing intent. "You dare?" Shang Mingjia was so frightened that he retreated abruptly, and he fell to the ground with a plop. Immediately, he felt his legs heat up, and warm liquid flowed out, and the air emitted a pungent smell of urine. Scared to the point of peeing. To everyone's surprise, Shang Mingjia, who was usually high and mighty and insufferably arrogant, had actually wet his pants. Nye Tian curled his lips and smiled, and said, "I don't care that you like to be Lan Binji's watchdog, but unfortunately, you shouldn't have bitten me. But seeing that you wet your pants, I'll be merciful and spare your dog life for the time being. Keep your eyes open next time, and don't bite people randomly." After he finished speaking, Nye Tian didn't have any interest to spare Shang Mingjia another glance. Killing a person who was scared to the point of peeing his pants in public would only dirty his hands. "Boss, do you really want the cultivation room? This is Prince Binji's cultivation room." Seeing Nye Tian walk towards the cultivation room, Jean de Bao pulled Nye Tian, and the fat on his face trembled violently because of nervousness. The conflict between Nye Tian and Lan Binji had long spread throughout Tyrant Cloud Academy. If Nye Tian snatched Lan Binji's cultivation room again, wouldn't the two of them directly fight when they met again? No matter what, Lan Binji was still a prince. Could it be that Nye Tian could cripple the latter like how he crippled Shang Mingjia? Nye Tian turned around and patted Jean de Bao's shoulder and said, "De Bao, rest assured, it's just a cultivation room. I believe Lan Binji will be very happy to give it to me." Jean de Bao was completely speechless. With Lan Binji's character, it was impossible for him to give the cultivation room to Nye Tian, and it was even more impossible for him to be very happy. But Nye Tian had already made up his mind, and Jean de Bao had no other choice but to risk his life to accompany the gentleman. Hence, under the watchful eyes of everyone, Nye Tian entered Lan Binji's cultivation room, and Jean de Bao entered Shang Mingjia's cultivation room. After Nye Tian entered the cultivation room, it was immediately sealed by a restriction. This restriction could isolate all disturbances from the outside world, unless someone forcibly broke through the restriction. When a martial artist was cultivating, their body and soul would be in a state of concentration, and the most taboo was to be disturbed. Once disturbed, especially at the critical moment of breaking through to a higher realm, there would be a risk of cultivation deviation. The restriction of the cultivation room was specially set up to prevent martial artists from being disturbed, and generally, it could only be removed from the inside. After Nye Tian walked into the cultivation room, he immediately felt an extremely heavy pressure, making him feel that his whole body was much heavier. I didn't expect that Tyrant Cloud's cultivation room would be this good. It even has a gravity array. Nietion smiled faintly. Inside the cultivation room, there was not only a spirit gathering array, but also a gravity array. Chapter 125. Nietion sensed it for a moment and murmured, "This gravity array is not bad. It can be continuously increased. If I'm not wrong, the gravity will increase tenfold every day I stay in the cultivation room." An increase in gravity was very beneficial to a cultivator. The biggest benefit was that it could temper a cultivator's body and make it even stronger. 10 days. I'll leave after 10 days. Nietion smiled faintly and made up his mind. He estimated that Xioshan's injuries would be more or less healed in 10 days. At that time, he would be able to help heal his damaged Yuan meridians. Moreover, the gravity would increase by about 100 times after 10 days, which was basically the limit of what Nietion could endure. Without further delay, Nietion sat down cross-legged and quickly entered a state of cultivation. Nietion entered the primal chaos origin coffin in his consciousness space and started to circulate the 9 war god art. In the cultivation room that was rich in heaven and earth spirit energy, Nietion's cultivation speed was at least 3 to 4 times faster than before. As the heaven and earth spirit energy gathered, Nietion's body started to glow with a faint golden light. This was the golden sky armor produced by the first stage of the 9 war god art, the golden sky realm. Nietion could clearly sense that the spiritual power of heaven and earth was flowing through his meridians and gradually transforming into the power within them. Heaven and earth spirit energy was divided into different attributes. The same applied to a cultivator's Yuan spirit. According to the different attributes, heaven and earth spirit energy was divided into 9 major attributes: metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, lightning, light, and darkness. Metal, wood, water, fire, and earth were known as the 5 elements of earth, while wind, lightning, light, and darkness were known as the 4 elements of sky. Elemental spirits with the 5 elements were the most common. Elemental spirits with the 4 elements were rarer, especially the light and darkness attributes. However, Nietion still did not know what attribute his primal chaos origin coffin was. He had a strange feeling that perhaps the primal chaos origin coffin did not belong to the 9 major attributes. Instead, it was an attribute that was separate from the 9 major attributes. As for what this attribute was, Nietion still did not know. Nietion waited until his Yuan meridians and Yuan spirit were filled to the brim with heaven and earth spiritual energy before breaking through to the next realm. After half a day, Nietion let out a long breath of turbid air, his face revealing a satisfied smile. His strength rose another level, reaching the 6th level origin spirit realm. But Nietion was not satisfied. He was preparing to assault the 7th level origin spirit realm. Right now, the gravity in the cultivation room was not too strong, which was more suitable for breaking through to the next realm. If the gravity in the cultivation room became stronger, it would be difficult to break through to the next realm. Spending another half a day's time, Nietion successfully reached 7th level origin spirit strength. From the 5th level origin spirit realm to the 7th level origin spirit realm, Nietion merely used 1 day's time. This cultivation speed could only be described as the speed of light. However, Nietion knew that 1 day of his was equivalent to 10 days of an ordinary martial artist. Moreover, he was currently in the cultivation room, and his cultivation speed had increased by 3 to 4 times. It was almost equivalent to a month or 2 of hard work for an ordinary martial artist. Letting out a long breath, Nietion rested for a moment. When his mental state recovered, he did not waste any more time, his divine sense entering the 10th origin veins realm domain. Inside the realm domain, the primordial star stone was akin to a stone pillar connecting heaven and earth, towering and unmoving. With the primordial star stone as the center, the realm domain origin formation slowly revolved without rest, as if creating traces of life force for this stretch of boundless heaven and earth. Power of stars, primordial star stone. One day, I'll see through all of your secrets. Nietion looked at the majestic heaven and earth in front of him and muttered to himself. He came under the primordial star stone and sat down cross-legged, focusing all of his mind on the seemingly far away, but in reality, even further away above the first level of the celestial river. Following Nietion's comprehension in his mind, stars gradually lit up above the first level of the celestial river. After a moment, several dozen stars sensed it at the same time. Akin to shooting stars, they were cast onto the enormous primordial star stone. On the primordial star stone, the originally dim star spirit patterns, close to 100, were sensed, accepting the power of stars and being instantly activated. Sure enough, they've joined together. Nietion was so excited that he suddenly stood up. His eyes followed the direction of the primordial star stone and saw that the newly activated star spirit patterns and the original star spirit patterns had joined together, forming a long line. The long arc was very much like the tip of an iceberg of an unusually grand painting. Feeling this way, Nietion could more clearly understand the inconceivable nature of the primordial star stone. This feeling was like being in a vast and boundless space, and he himself occupied a very small part of this endless space, like a drop of water in the ocean, a grain of dust in the desert. So insignificant, so indiscernible. Nietion was shocked. He had long guessed that the primordial star stone most likely contained a very terrifying star totem. And these activated star power were bits and pieces of the star totem. He could even feel that there was an immeasurable power hidden under the star totem, which was absolutely a terrible existence that no other power could compare to. The star totem seems to have the same wonderful effect as the star spirit. It's just that it's grander, more complex, and more mysterious. If I can awaken enough star power, I might be able to activate the power contained in the star totem. Nietion nodded heavily, his heart extremely excited. It was hard to imagine that a small star spirit pattern already contained such a terrifying power. Then, on the primordial star stone, there was an enormous star spirit that seemed to connect heaven and earth. What kind of power did it contain? It was definitely a power that could destroy heaven and earth. After fantasizing for a while, Nietion's mind returned to a more concrete problem. He carefully counted the star power of each star on the primordial star stone. After a while, Nietion got the answer. Right now, he had awakened a total of 128 star power. A total of 128 star power. Nietion's face revealed an incomparably excited expression. Previously, he had only awakened 32 star power, but the power in his hands had already reached 50,000 Jin. Now that the star power had multiplied by several times, the power in his hands was definitely more than 50,000 Jin. A force of 100,000 Jin, even an ordinary all-creations warrior would find it difficult to achieve. Nietion felt that his whole body was bursting with power. Compared to a day ago, his combat power had at least doubled. It seems that I can only awaken this much star power. The power of the star totem is still too early. I should leave the Star River precinct first. It's time to carve the star spirit. Nietion was very satisfied with the increase in his strength. With a proud smile, he directly left the Star River precinct. His divine sense once again appeared in his soul space. This time, Nietion was ready to carve the star spirit. At this time, he suddenly found that his spiritual power had also increased, rising by one level, reaching the 41st level. The higher the level, the harder it was to increase the spiritual power. Those alchemists, blacksmiths, and spiritual array masters all desperately cultivated their spiritual power, but they may not be as fast as Nietion. Okay, it's time to look at the third page of the original Star Spirit Tome. Nietion was extremely excited. Finally, he was going to open the third page of the original Star Spirit Tome. The original Star Spirit Tome. Previously, Nietion could only open the introduction and the second page. The original Star Spirit Tome indicated that one's strength had to reach the 5th level of the Essence Spirit Realm to be able to open the third page. Nietion's previous strength was already at the 5th level of the Essence Spirit Realm, but he did not have the time to look at the third page. Chapter 126. The Star Soul Original Opus slowly flipped open. On the third page, 12 Star Soul diagrams were flickering. Holy shit, and it's a first-level astral soul? As Nyetian stared at the 12 astral soul diagrams, he couldn't help but feel a tinge of disappointment as he involuntarily cursed. Initially, he was still hoping that a second-level astral soul would appear on this page. But to his disappointment, it was still a first-level astral soul. However, the astral souls on this page were much more complicated than the ones on the second page. Not only that, the astral energy within the astral souls was also much denser and contained even more profound and intricate array runes. Nyetian swept his gaze across all the astral soul diagrams as he involuntarily shook his head. He estimated that with his current strength, if he wanted to inscribe these astral soul diagrams, even the simplest one would require at least 5 to 6 days of time. In order to inscribe an astral soul, one could only use astral energy to inscribe it. Naturally, one would also need a powerful mental energy to support it. Currently, the amount of astral energy Nyetian could control was much greater than before. However, it wasn't easy for him to inscribe an astral soul on the third page. Glancing at it, the third page contained the most complicated astral souls, which were at least several times more intricate compared to the previous page. Not only that, the difficulty of inscribing these astral souls had also increased by tens of times. Based on his current strength, if he wanted to inscribe these astral souls, he would require at least a month's time. A month's time is too terrifying. I don't have that much time. Nyetian shook his head with a bitter smile on his face, before finally locking his gaze onto the simplest astral soul. The astral soul that Nyetian was paying attention to was an illusory armor known as the Flame Demon Armor. There aren't many complicated areas in this astral soul, and the inscriptions on it can be considered exquisite. Not bad. Nyetian smiled, but then sighed. The biggest flaw is that the Flame Demon Armor seems to be a defense-type astral soul. I prefer astral souls that take the initiative to attack. Nyetian decided that he would first inscribe the Flame Demon's armor. If there was still time, he would inscribe the remaining astral souls on the second page. The astral souls on the second page were relatively simpler. With Nyetian's current strength, it was extremely easy for him to inscribe. He should be able to inscribe one astral soul within a day. With the plan set in his heart, Nyetian didn't waste any more time and immediately immersed himself in the process of inscribing his astral soul. Nyetian circulated his 10th origin meridian. Threads of star energy were like sharp blades that carved stroke by stroke on the primal chaos origin coffin. With his previous experience, Nyetian was much more adept at carving. However, there were still many details that required him to waste a large amount of mental energy and star power. The process of inscribing an astral soul was extremely complicated. Every strand of astral energy had to be just right. It couldn't be too heavy or too light. Luckily, Nyetian's mental energy far surpassed that of ordinary people. If not, he definitely wouldn't be able to inscribe even a single astral soul. Just as Nyetian was fully focused on inscribing his astral souls, something was happening outside the training room. After the first day, Jean de Bayo came out of the cultivation room and found that Nyetian was still in the cultivation room. He did not find it strange. Many people would cultivate in the cultivation room for a long time, usually staying for 3 to 5 days before coming out. Because of the Fiend God blood scripture, Jean de Bayo did not have the mood to cultivate. Hence, he came out on the first day. Ever since he awakened the Fiend God blood scripture, his cultivation had been stagnating at the first level of the essence spirit realm. Hence, to him, cultivation did not have much attraction. Jean Mingxin invited all the alchemists in Blue Cloud City to treat Jean de Bayo. However, not a single one of them could see anything wrong. Everyone said that there was no problem with Jean de Bayo's astral soul. However, the problem was that no matter how Jean de Bayo cultivated, there was no improvement in his cultivation. Jean de Bayo had basically resigned himself to his fate. In this lifetime, his cultivation was basically fixed at the first level of the essence spirit realm. 3 days later, Jean de Bayo came to the cultivation room again. He found that Nye Tian had still not come out. At this time, the news of Nye Tian crippling Shang Mingjia's sword Qi had already spread throughout the entire Tyrant Cloud Academy. However, what made Jean de Bayo feel strange was that Lan Binji did not appear in the cultivation room. Even when his cultivation room was snatched by Nye Tian, he did not have any reaction. Could it be that Prince Binji is really afraid? He willingly gave up the cultivation room to Boss. Jean de Bayo felt strange in his heart, but he was more worried about Nye Tian at this time. He had already stayed in the cultivation room for 4 days. The cultivation room's gravity had already increased to 40 times. 40 times gravity was not what ordinary people could endure. The cultivation room was separated from the outside world by restrictions. Jean de Bayo did not know what happened to Nye Tian and could only worry helplessly. Jean de Bayo knew that Nye Tian's physique was far stronger than ordinary martial artists. It was definitely not an issue for him to endure 40 times gravity. Hence, he was not particularly worried either. In a twinkle, another 3 days passed. Jean de Bayo came to the cultivation room once more and was already anxious like an ant on a hot pan. His fat face swelled up explosively again. It's been 7 days. Why hasn't Boss come out yet? Jean de Bayo was anxious in his heart and wished that he could forcefully break open the cultivation room's restrictions. Sadly, he did not have this strength. 7 days. That meant that the cultivation room's gravity had already increased to a horrifying 70 times. The pressure of 70 times gravity. Normally, only giant spirit realm martial artists could endure it. Jean Ming, what's the Academy's longest cultivation record? Jean de Bayo suddenly asked Jean Ming beside him. Jean Ming's expression froze for a long time. He swallowed hard and said 7 days. To date, the longest cultivation record in Tyrant Cloud Academy was 7 days. And Nye Tian just happened to have stayed in the cultivation room for 7 days already. 7 days. Jean de Bayo immediately felt his head explode. He immediately asked, "What's that person's strength?" It seems to be 9th level Wanxiang. Jean Ming's tongue was already stuttering. 9th level Wanxiang. Jean de Bayo sucked in a breath of cold air. He remembered that when Nye Tian entered the cultivation room, his strength was merely at the 5th level origin spirit realm. He was a full 1.5 major realm away from that person who held the longest cultivation record. Something won't happen, right? Jean de Bayo's heart pounded. In the past, there have been cases of students dying in the cultivation room too. After all, cultivation rooms were rare. Some people were obsessed with cultivation and wanted to challenge their limits. In the end, they were crushed to death by the strong gravity of the cultivation room. No, I have to hurry and find Principal Qi. Jean de Bayo no longer hesitated and hurried to find Qi Feng. Jean Ming grabbed him and said, "Young Master Jean, Principal Qi is in closed-door cultivation. You won't be able to find him." Oh no! Jean de Bayo suddenly remembered that Qi Feng happened to be in closed-door cultivation a few days ago and wasn't in the academy right now. What should we do now? Jean de Bayo's forehead was dripping with sweat, and chills ran down his back. Rui Qinyu definitely wouldn't be able to be found. Qi Feng was in closed-door cultivation, and only Fan Jinwu was left. He definitely wouldn't help. Even if Jean de Bayo told Jean Mingxin about this, the latter wouldn't be able to do anything. After all, this was a matter of Tyrant Cloud Academy. No matter how great Jean Mingxin's influence was, he couldn't interfere with Tyrant Cloud Academy's matters. Young Master Jean, let's continue waiting. Boss Nye Tian's strength is freakish. He'll definitely be fine. Jean Ming wiped his sweat and comforted. We can only continue waiting. Jean de Bayo let out a long sigh, a helpless look on his face. In the blink of an eye, another 2 days passed. Today was already the 10th day since Nye Tian entered the cultivation room. The 10th day, the gravity in the cultivation room had already soared to a shocking 100 times. Chapter 127. At this moment, A large number of people had gathered in the cultivation field, surrounding Nie Tian's cultivation room so tightly that not even a drop of water could pass through. The matter of Nie Tian entering the cultivation room for 10 days had already caused a sensation in Tyrant Cloud Academy. The onlookers were all students, not a single teacher of the academy. Logically speaking, with such a sensational event happening in the academy, it was very unreasonable that not a single teacher had come. Jean DeBayo knew that Fan Jinwoo and Lan Binji were behind this. Now, most people thought that something must have happened to Nie Tian. The longer he stayed in the cultivation room, the higher the probability of him dying. Outside the cultivation room, there was an uproar. Nie Tian has already been in there for 10 days. The gravity in the cultivation room has increased to 100 times. That's a full 100 times. Even a giant spirit realm martial artist can't withstand that kind of pressure. Something must have happened. Maybe he's already been crushed into meat paste. What a pity. Nie Tian is the freshman king of the academy. I heard that Nie Tian once fought with the commander of the Imperial Guards, Lord Qin Yetian. Maybe he can really withstand 100 times the gravity. Bullsh asterisk T. That's 100 times the gravity. Even the academy's teachers can't withstand it. Everyone spoke one after another. Most people were sure that Nie Tian had already died in the cultivation room. Jean DeBayo stood outside the cultivation room, his whole body drenched in cold sweat, his clothes drenched. He had not told Jin Mingxin and the rest, nor did he tell Qiu Shan and Qiu Linger. In fact, even if he told them, it would be useless. It would just be a futile worry. Young Master Jean, how is teacher? At this time, a figure squeezed over in a panic. It was Zhang Yifeng. Zhang Yifeng had inadvertently learned about the matter of Tyrant Cloud Academy and immediately rushed over. It's Master Zhang Yifeng. Nie Tian is Master Zhang Yifeng's teacher. Looks like Master Zhang Yifeng is going to suffer the pain of losing his teacher. Watch your mouth. Don't talk nonsense. If Master Zhang Yifeng hears it, you'll have to bear the consequences. Zhang Yifeng's arrival caused a commotion. Zhang Yifeng ignored the voices around him and looked at the cultivation room nervously. Jean DeBayo shook his head helplessly. How many days has teacher been in the cultivation room? Zhang Yifeng asked. 10 days. Jean DeBayo had a pained expression as he cursed. Damn that Jean Ming. I sent him to look for a teacher in the academy, but he still hasn't returned. Young Master Jean, just as Jean DeBayo finished cursing, Jean Ming squeezed through the crowd, his forehead covered in sweat. Jean Ming, where's the teacher I asked you to find? Jean DeBayo grabbed Jean Ming, but he didn't see any teacher. Jean Ming shook his head helplessly and said dejectedly, none of the teachers came. They all said they had something to do. Damn it, a bunch of bastards. Jean DeBayo did not care about anything else and directly cursed. These teachers must have received Fan Jinji's message and turned a blind eye to Nie Tian's matter. Chi Feng was currently in seclusion. Otherwise, he definitely wouldn't have reached this step. Whatever. I'm going to break the cultivation room's restrictive spell by force, Zhang Yifeng said anxiously. He stepped forward to the cultivation room's entrance, trying to break the restrictive spell by force. You dare. Right at this moment, a furious roar sounded out. It was like rolling thunder, intimidating everyone. Immediately after, the crowd automatically opened up a path, and a young man walked over with large strides. The man looked to be about 20 years old. He had sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. His face was cold and stern, and his gaze was stern. Oh my God, he's the #1 person in the inner court, Shang Mingyu. It's really Shang Mingyu. I heard that his younger brother, Shang Mingjie, had his sword Qi crippled by Nie Tian 10 days ago. I wonder if it's true. It's absolutely true. When Nie Tian crippled Shang Mingjie's sword Qi, I was at the side and saw it with my own eyes. Nie Tian only used one sword strike to make Shang Mingjie piss his pants. Then it's over. Shang Mingyu is definitely here for revenge. There was a commotion in the surroundings, and the atmosphere suddenly became oppressive. Shang Mingyu took a step forward and directly stopped Zhang Yifeng. He glared at the latter and had no intention of moving aside. You dare stop me? Zhang Yifeng was slightly taken aback and immediately rebuked. Do you know who I am? Zhang Yifeng was very famous in Blue Cloud City. Many big shots had to lower their heads and show some respect when they saw him. Now that he was blocked by a rash brat who came out of nowhere, he was very angry. Shang Mingyu glanced at Zhang Yifeng and said cold, Master Zhang Yifeng, this is Tyrant Cloud Academy. You want to forcefully break the cultivation room's restriction. As a student of Tyrant Cloud Academy, of course I have to stop you. Shang Mingyu had just finished his seclusion and heard the grievous news that his younger brother Sword Qi was crippled. Of course, he wouldn't let this matter go. Not to mention that the person in front of him was Zhang Yifeng. Even if it was the Emperor of Blue Cloud City, he wouldn't take a step back. You! Zhang Yifeng was infuriated. His face turned slightly red and immediately turned cold. He said, What if I insist on breaking the cultivation room's restriction? Then don't blame me for being impolite. Shang Mingyu's body shook. A small golden sword appeared in between his eyebrows. Immediately, surging sword qi spread out. Everyone couldn't bear the pressure of the powerful sword qi and retreated. Zhang Yifeng suddenly sensed something. He frowned and said in surprise, You have nurtured sword heart? Shang Mingyu sneered and said, Master Zhang has some knowledge. To be able to see that I have nurtured sword heart. That's right. I have already nurtured sword heart. That's why I advise Master Zhang, don't look for trouble. Otherwise, under my sword heart, there won't be anyone left alive. Shang Mingyu was very domineering. He was actually directly threatening Zhang Yifeng. Zhang Yifeng didn't retreat. He said coldly, You dare to kill me? He was a third-ranked alchemist and possessed the alchemist badge. He was protected by the Alchemist Association. If Shang Mingyu dared to kill him, it would be bringing a disaster to himself and the entire Shang clan. You can try. Shang Mingyu actually took a step forward. His eyes shot out flames of fury. His entire body was filled with killing intent. Jin Ming, immediately go to Jin residence and call my father over. Tell him that something big has happened. Ask him to hurry over. Jin DeBao saw that the situation wasn't good. He pulled Jin Ming out and told him to look for Jin Mingxin. Jin Ming agreed and turned to leave. Courting death. Shang Mingyu screamed when he saw Jin Ming leaving. Immediately, two sharp sword qi tore through the air. Crack! Crack! In the next moment, two sounds of bones breaking could be heard. Jin Ming's knees exploded. Fresh blood spurted out. My legs! Jin Ming, who had just run 2 steps, let out a hysterical howl. His knees went soft, and he fell to the ground. Both his kneecaps were broken. Jin Ming. Jin DeBao saw this scene and shouted loudly. He sprinted over. Young Master Jin, my legs are crippled. Jin Ming screamed. The pain from his knees made him cry, but the blow of his legs being crippled made him feel even more despair. Everyone subconsciously retreated, maintaining a distance from Shang Mingyu. Shang Mingyu was too ruthless. He actually crippled Jin Ming's knees. Chapter 128. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air, looking at Shang Mingyu in horror. And in the crowd, Lan Binji and Qin Yuhu quietly hid, looking at the scene before them complacently. Nietan, Nietian, never would have thought that this prince wanted to kill you at all costs. Who knew that you were so foolish, actually playing yourself to death? After all, just a country bumpkin. Probably never seen a cultivation room in this lifetime. Little trash wanted to overturn the heavens. Death is not to be pitied. The corners of Lan Binji's mouth curled up sinisterly, feeling extremely pleased in his heart. In his eyes, Nietian was just a poor lad who popped out from God knows where. The first time he entered a cultivation room, he was too agitated, and in the end, he died inside. If not for being in a public place at this moment, Lan Binji would definitely be laughing hysterically. Qin Yuhu was very happy too. Who could have thought that Nietian would actually die in such a manner? Everyone was certain that Nietian already died inside the cultivation room. Perhaps even the corpse would be smelly already. Inside the cultivation room, Nietian was naturally still alive. Furthermore, he was living very well. After his strength rose to the 7th level origin spirit realm, Nietian started to focus on inscribing astral souls. He spent a whole 5 days and finally inscribed the flame demon armor. In the remaining time, Nietian naturally did not idle, but busied himself with inscribing the second page of astral souls. The second page's astral souls were clearly simpler than the third page's astral souls. Therefore, inscribing each astral soul did not spend too much time on Nietian. He used 3 days' time and easily inscribed 3 astral souls: Flowing Leaf, 7 Murders, Origin Reversing Netherblade, Dragon Raising Arms. Adding in the Flame Demon Armor, there were a total of 4 astral souls on Nietian's Chaos original coffin. 4 astral souls were sufficient for Nietian to deal with any danger. When time entered the 10th day, Nietian clearly felt the gravitational pressure becoming more obvious. It's already 100 times the gravitational pressure. Even a giant spirit realm martial artist would find it hard to withstand this kind of pressure too. Fortunately, I have the 9 Extremes War God Arts Golden Extreme Yellow Heaven Battle Armor and the power of 128 stars in my body. Otherwise, even I would not be able to withstand such pressure, Nietian muttered to himself. 100 times the gravitational pressure. This was already the limit that Nietian could withstand at the moment. Although he only had 7th level origin spirit strength right now, his physique was comparable to giant spirit realm martial artists. He was absolutely an unkillable cockroach level. It's time to practice the AO sword tactics. In the practice room, Nietian stood up and felt that his breathing was a little uneven. On the path of the sword Dao, sword moves and sword techniques were completely dependent on the swordsman's comprehension. It was a competition of sword Dao aptitude. Therefore, Nietian was able to skip the 2 realms of sword moves and sword techniques and directly enter the realm of sword energy. However, after entering the sword chi realm, the swordsman would need to use sword chi to nurture the sword heart. This was a relatively slow and arduous process. Not only did it require the support of sword Dao talent, but it also required the slow accumulation of sword chi. Without accumulating sword chi to a certain degree, it would be impossible to nurture the sword heart. Just like a seed sprouting, it was impossible to break through the soil without enough nutrition. Sword chi was the nutrition and soil needed to nurture a sword heart. Under 100 times the gravitational environment, the sword moves that Nietian performed became heavier and slower. But under such extreme pressure, it was very helpful for the accumulation of sword chi. Nietian could clearly feel the sword chi in his dantian becoming denser and denser. He had 2 kinds of sword chi in. This was unprecedented. Even though Nietian in his previous life was already a monstrous genius in the sword Dao, he had never heard of a swordsman who could condense 2 kinds of sword chi at the same time. 2 kinds of sword chi. One was the proud sword chi produced by the proud sword art. The other was produced by the 10th origin vein, star soul, primordial stone. Nietian named the second kind of sword chi as star soul, sword chi. What surprised him the most was that the proud sword chi and star soul sword chi could be perfectly fused together, and the power after fusion was far greater than ordinary sword chi. This was also the main reason why Nietian was able to destroy Shang Mingjia with 1 sword move. Proud sword chi and star soul sword chi. As long as I can make both kinds of sword chi reach the realm of sword profound, just with the strength of the sword Dao, it is enough for me to dominate the heaven realm. Nietian thought so in his heart, and couldn't help but show a comfortable smile on his face. In his previous life, Nietian was already at the realm of sword profound, but the heaven realm also had swordsmen who were on par with him. Limitless Sword Saint Imo Qianjun, Western Sword Emperor Jiu Qiansheng, Dongchuan Sword Evil Duguan I, North Sea Sword Lord Gui Hen, plus Dan Knight Proud Sword Nietian. The 5 people were known as the 5 peaks of the heaven realm sword Dao. The strength of the first 4 people was not inferior to Nietian. However, once Nietian mastered 2 types of sword profundities, he would be able to suppress these freaks with ease. Nietian was sweating profusely after he finished a set of sword movements of the 3 primary styles of the AO sword tactics. Under the pressure of this 100 times gravity, even he felt very uncomfortable. It's time to leave. Nietion put away the sword Absolute Heaven Slash, wiped the sweat on his forehead, and prepared to leave the training room. At the same time, outside the training room, Shang Mingyu, what are you doing? Jin Ming's legs were crippled by Shang Mingyu. Jean DeBayo was unable to restrain his anger. He roared and his eyes almost spewed fire. Shang Mingyu looked at Jean DeBayo cold, seemed to remember something, and said, "You are the young master of the Jean family? So what?" Jean DeBayo clenched his fist, almost fighting with Shang Mingyu. Jean Ming was also a member of the Jean family, and he was crippled in public. Jean DeBayo couldn't swallow this anger. "What's your relationship with Nye Tian inside?" Shang Mingyu raised his eyebrows and asked coldly. "Nye Tian is my boss." Jean DeBayo shouted, "I know you want to avenge Shang Mingjia. You can't wait for my boss to die in the training room, right? He crippled my brother's sword chi, damn it." Shang Mingyu almost squeezed out the last two words from his teeth. "Damn it." Jean DeBayo couldn't care less anymore and scolded. "Are the people of the Shang family all cowards? Your brother is a waste. His sword chi was crippled by my boss with one move. You are a coward. You only know how to use this kind of despicable means. If you have the ability, let my boss come out. I promise you can't even take one move from him." "Fatty, shut up." Shang Mingyu was scolded in public, and his sword chi became even sharper. The terrifying killing intent almost condensed into a substance, making people suffocate. "You told me to shut up, but I can't." Jean DeBayo scolded angrily. How could he stop? And scolded even more arrogantly. "You, Shang Mingyu, are called the number one in the inner courtyard, but you are actually a coward who only knows how to use despicable means. Trash like you can only use some tricks behind the scenes. If you fight my boss head on, you will definitely be beaten to the point where you can't even put on your pants." Shang Mingyu was completely enraged by Jean DeBayo. He roared crazily, and his sword chi was filled with terrifying killing intent. He shouted, "Jean DeBayo, you're courting death. Golden Sun sword art, single star strike." With a desperate roar, the sword on Shang Mingyu's back was unsheathed, and the sword pointed at Jean DeBayo. A terrifying sword chi rolled out, straight towards Jean DeBayo's chest. Chapter 129. Shang Mingyu sent Jean DeBayo flying with one strike, and the entire place became deathly silent. Who was Jean DeBayo? Jean Mingxin's only son. Who was Jean Mingxin? The president of the Blue Cloud Merchant Association. He controlled almost half of the empire's assets. More importantly, the Blue Cloud Merchant Association was backed by the Martial Merchant Association. Although many people had never heard of the Martial Merchant Association, it was an organization not weaker than the Alchemist Association. With these connections, Jean DeBayo's status was indescribably noble, even comparable to a prince. If he died in Shang Mingyu's hands, Jean Mingxin would definitely be furious. At that time, the entire Shang clan would not be able to bear Jean Mingxin's anger. Unfortunately, Shang Mingyu was already furious and did not have the time to think so much. "Jean DeBayo, you can die. Who asked you to be so loyal to Nye Tian?" Lan Binji looked at Jean DeBayo on the ground, his heart pounding in agitation. Jean DeBayo was dead anyway, and Jean Mingxin could only blame it on the Shang clan. It had nothing to do with Lan Binji. Jean DeBayo die. Qin Yuhu was even more excited, his heart jumping to his throat. Jean clan and Qin clan did not have a good relationship to begin with, and Qin Yuhu was even more disgusted with Jean DeBayo. "Coward, is that all you've got?" Just as everyone was shocked, Jean DeBayo miraculously stood up and was not seriously injured. There was only a faint trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. Hiss! Everyone sucked in a breath. Who would have thought that Jean DeBayo actually did not die after taking a blow from Shang Mingyu head-on? Shang Mingyu was at the 5th level of the Wanxiang realm and a martial artist who specialized in the sword Dao. His body had already nurtured the heart of the sword, and his attack power was very strong. Although it was not comparable to a giant spirit realm martial artist, it was not far off. And Jean DeBayo? the famous trash of Tyrant Cloud Academy. His strength stagnated for many years, and he was still at the first level of the Origin Spirit Realm. Even if one used their toes to think, it was impossible for Jean de Bayo to be alive. Damn it, it's the Golden Thunder Battle Armor. At this time, Qin Yuhu suddenly understood and stamped his feet in anger. Lan Binji looked at Qin Yuhu cold, because Jean de Bayo's Golden Thunder Battle Armor was one from the Qin family. Qin Yuhu had guessed correctly. Jean de Bayo had indeed relied on the Golden Thunder Battle Armor to survive. The Golden Thunder Battle Armor was a Tier 4 spirit artifact. It could withstand the attack of a giant spirit realm martial artist. That was why Shang Mingyu's sword, just now, could not claim his life. If not for the Golden Lightning Battle Armor, Jean de Bayo would already be a pile of minced meat. You're courting death. When Shang Mingyu saw that Jean de Bayo was still alive, he was instantly enraged. He completely lost his reason and swung his sword again. Sword chi enveloped the surrounding tens of meters, almost suffocating everyone. Die! Without the slightest hesitation, Shang Mingyu once again stabbed out with his sword, aiming for Jean de Bayo's throat. Cold. In an instant, Jean de Bayo felt a bone-piercing chill. It was as if his entire body had lost all feeling and he couldn't move at all. Shang Mingyu mustered all his strength and went all out. He was determined to kill with one strike. Die! As he struck out with his sword, a murderous sword chi filled the air with a majestic aura, pressing down on Jean de Bayo. If this strike hit Jean de Bayo, he would die without a doubt. However, at this time, a strange change occurred. Stop! A familiar roar suddenly sounded. Want to kill my brother? In your dreams. A figure sprinted out of the cultivation room, his feet moving in a strange footwork, the figure leaping high into the air. Boss! Jean de Bayo's eyes slightly widened as he saw a figure appear in midair. At the critical moment, the figure that appeared was none other than Ye Tian. Dot! While the figure was still in the air, the absolute heaven slash already appeared in Ye Tian's hand. He struck out with his sword and shouted, one sword collapsing the night. When a sword struck out, the sky was instantly filled with sword shadows, dazzling and eye-catching. Kill! A deep roar sounded, and a strange scene appeared. All the sword shadows in the air instantly converged into a several meters long flowing light sword, turning into a stream of light and shooting out like lightning. PFFF. A crisp sound pierced through the air. The flowing light sword flew past, and all of Shang Mingyu's sword chi dissipated in the air. And yet Tian landed steadily on the ground. Seeing that Jean de Bayo was fine, he heaved a sigh of relief. Boss! Seeing Niet Tian again, Jean de Bayo burst into tears. Teacher! Zhang Yifeng was also very emotional and wanted to kneel down again, but he was stopped by Niet Tian. Everyone stared at Niet Tian with their mouths agape, completely dumbfounded. Especially Lan Binji and Qin Yuhu. Their donkey eyes stared at Niet Tian, not daring to believe the scene in front of them. 10 days. A whole 10 days. Niet Tian stayed in the cultivation room for 10 days and actually came out unscathed. Not only would Lan Binji and the others not believe it, even ordinary people wouldn't believe it. Oh my god, it's Niet Tian. He's actually still alive. It's really Niet Tian. He's actually completely fine, and his strength has even become stronger. He stayed in the cultivation room for 10 days. My dear father, how did he do it? After a long time, everyone finally reacted, and a wave of exclamations and sounds of saliva being swallowed could be heard. Niet Tian naturally didn't care about these people's reactions. He didn't even know that he had unintentionally broken the Tyrant Cloud Academy's longest cultivation record. De Bayo, are you all right? Niet Tian couldn't help but ask when he saw Jean de Bayo's dazed and pale face. Ah, Jean de Bayo reacted and hurriedly shook his head. I'm fine, I'm fine. Niet Tian looked at Jean de Bayo and seemed to vaguely sense that there was an extremely restless energy surging in the latter's body. However, seeing that Jean de Bayo was indeed fine, he didn't pay much attention to it. Teacher, are you all right? Zhang Yifeng walked over and sized up Niet Tian as though he was making sure that Nietian wasn't injured. Nietian smiled faintly and said, "What could happen to me? Wasn't it just casually cultivating?" Casually cultivating? Nietian's words immediately shocked a large number of people. "Boss, how is this casually cultivating? You're cultivating with your life on the line." "DeBeo, what's going on?" After confirming that Jean DeBeo was fine, Nietian swept his gaze over everyone present, and finally his gaze landed on Shang Mingyu as he asked lightly. Jean DeBeo calmed down and said, "Boss, he's Shang Mingjia's big brother, Shang Mingyu." Shang Mingjia's big brother? Nietian was slightly stunned, and it took him a long time to recall who Shang Mingjia was. And then he teased, "Looks like you're here to take revenge for Shang Mingjia." You Nietian? Shang Mingyu only recovered from his shock at this moment, and he stared blankly at Nietian, unable to wrap his head around it. At this time, he finally knew why Shang Mingjia's sword chi would be crippled by Nietian's one-sword move. It was because Nietian's strength was too strong until it made him wary. His sword move, just now, was very domineering, but Nietian just casually swung his sword and broke all of his sword chi, appearing very effortlessly and casually. Shang Mingyu really could not figure out how a martial artist who was only at the 7th level Origin Spirit realm could possibly erupt with such terrifying power. The move that Nietian used just now was one sword collapsing the night, the same as Sword 17 and Sword Shadow 300 billion, all one of the AO Sword Arts Elementary Level 3 moves. Chapter 130. Nietian looked at Shang Mingyu and was slightly stunned. "You have cultivated the sword heart?" With just a casual glance, Nietian could see that Shang Mingyu had cultivated the sword heart. Although there was only one realm difference between the sword chi realm and the sword heart realm, there was a world of difference. After a swordsman cultivated the sword heart, the sword chi would be greatly enhanced and might even condense into a substance. In the case of the same level, a swordsman with the sword heart was more than several times stronger than a swordsman without the sword heart. Shang Mingyu cultivated the sword heart, and his strength was a few realms higher than Shang Mingjia. So his real battle power was far beyond Shang Mingjia. Shang Mingjia was stunned and asked, "How do you know?" He did not reveal the sword heart. So how did Nietian know that he had cultivated the sword heart? "I want to know, and I know." Nietian smiled faintly, his whole body exuding strong confidence. "You're courting death." Shang Mingyu screamed and actually attacked the next moment. He realized that Nietian was a terrible opponent, and he had to take the initiative to have the confidence to win. Golden Sun Sword Art, Double Sun, Devouring Cloud. Shang Mingyu stabbed out with his sword, and the terrible sword chi was like a thick cloud, sweeping over and actually condensing into a big bloody mouth in the air, blasting towards Nietian. One sword falling the night. Nietian was not surprised, and the sword Absolute Heaven Slash was used again, and it was the same move. The sword swept a few meters away, and a flowing light sword shadow flew out in the air. Bang! The sword chi of the two sides collided, and it was like a real collision, bursting out a dull loud sound. Immediately, an almost visible wave of air spread out, and Nietian and Shang Mingyu felt a strong impact, and at the same time, they retreated. Nietian took a few steps back, actually almost fell. The sword chi of a swordsman with the sword heart was really strong, and in a head-on collision, Nietian was slightly inferior. On the other hand, Shang Mingyu took 3 steps back and stood still. In the first head-on collision, Shang Mingyu firmly had the upper hand. However, there was no joy on his face. Instead, there was endless anger and shock. He was at the 5th tier of the Wanxiang tier, which was almost a major tier higher than Nietian. Moreover, he had even developed a sword heart. Under such an advantageous situation, he was actually unable to kill his opponent with a full-powered attack. In fact, he did not even manage to injure his opponent severely. To him, this was simply a humiliation. Nietian steadied his body, and a solemn expression appeared on his face. After all, Shang Mingyu was someone who possessed the heart of the sword, while Nietian was only at the sword chi realm. Even though his sword chi was far stronger than Shang Mingyu's sword chi, he could not face the latter's heart of the sword head-on. At this moment, the entire place was dead silent. Countless pairs of eyes were staring at Nie Tian. No words could express the shock in their hearts. Everyone in Tyrant Cloud Academy knew that Shang Mingyu was the #1 person in the Inner Academy, and he could be said to be an outstanding figure of the Imperial City's younger generation. However, someone as powerful as Shang Mingyu was actually unable to defeat Nie Tian. This was simply like a dream. Nie Tian just entered the academy. During the freshman martial meet, his strength was about the same as Prince Benji. Now, he can actually fight Shang Mingyu head-on. This is too inconceivable. Yeah, Shang Mingyu is the #1 person in the Inner Academy. I heard that many teachers are not a match for him. Nie Tian is really a monster. He persisted in the cultivation room for 10 days and fought Shang Mingyu the moment he came out. Monstrous to the point of making one's hair stand on end. Everyone whispered to each other and discussed in low voices. At the side, Lon Benji's face was swollen from anger, and he breathed heavily through his nose. Although he was arrogant, he also knew that his strength was completely not on the same level as Shang Mingyu. Just during the freshman martial meet, Nie Tian was still at the same level of battle as him. In a short 10 over days, Nie Tian could actually compete with Shang Mingyu. This kind of cultivation speed, if he did not see it with his own eyes, he would simply be unable to believe it. Nie Tian, who the hell are you? Lon Benji roared in his heart, his handsome face revealing traces of malevolence. The stronger the strength Nie Tian displayed, the more afraid Lon Benji was. Nie Tian, this prince must kill you, no matter what price I have to pay. Lon Benji's heart was filled with killing intent. If he could not kill Nie Tian, he would feel like there was a thorn in his back, a fishbone stuck in his throat. He would not be able to eat well or sleep well. Qin Yuhu sensed Lon Benji's killing intent, and a hint of a smile flashed across his mouth. He hooted in his heart, Lon Benji, be angry. Only when you are angry can you take revenge for my third brother. Qin Yuhu was naturally happy to see the conflict between Nie Tian and Lon Benji escalate. Only this way, Qin Yulong's revenge could be avenged. Right now, it was impossible to take revenge on Nie Tian with just the Qin family's strength. Shang Mingyu heard the voices of the people around him, and his heart became even angrier. To think that he, the dignified #1 in the inner courtyard, could not even take care of a new student, it was really a disgrace. Nie Tian, the next move will take your life. Shang Mingyu's eyes were bloodshot, and his rationality was completely replaced by anger, turning him into a pure killing weapon. Gold Sun Sword Art, 3 Sun Raging Flow. With a roar, a silver longsword appeared behind Shang Mingyu, suffused with a cold light, and the sword light spread out 5 meters. Is he going to use the sword spirit? Nie Tian frowned. The silver longsword that appeared behind Shang Mingyu was obviously his original spirit. The silver longsword was called Flowing Silver Sword, and it was Shang Mingyu's original spirit. Nie Tian glanced at Flowing Silver Sword, but shook his head slightly. Flowing Silver Sword was obviously of the water attribute, and Shang Mingyu's Gold Sun Sword Art was of the fire and metal attributes. The sword art and the sword spirit did not match, and even countered each other, so Shang Mingyu could not bring out the true power of the Gold Sun Sword Art. Go to hell! Shang Mingyu roared in anger, and the flowing silver sword's blades surged with 3 terrifying sword chi, like 3 swift and fierce spirit beasts, rushing towards Nie Tian. When everyone saw Shang Mingyu's imposing manner, their hearts suddenly turned cold, and in their hearts, they were already imagining the scene of Nie Tian being directly blown away or even smashed to pieces. Shang Mingyu's imposing manner was indeed very strong, but it was a pity that it was nothing in the eyes of Nie Tian. It was just a facade. More imposing manner, but not enough power, it's just for show. Nie Tianling sneered, and the 10 yuan meridians in his body revolved at the same time. The fierce yuan qi was like a river bursting through a dam, and the sword light of the sword absolute heaven shot out, spreading out 10 meters, it was even more terrifying than Shang Mingyu's. One sword turning the night. It was the same move again, the sword absolute heaven slash stabbed out, and the sword light condensed into a 10-meter-long sword shadow in the air. Like a giant beast, it pounced towards Shang Mingyu. At this moment, the three-sword chi that Shang Mingyu burst out suddenly, strangely merged into one, releasing a suffocating aura of the sword chi, almost condensing into a substance. Bang! The extreme moves collided, and the space actually shook. Crack, crack, crack. Immediately after, the limestone slabs on the ground received the impact of the ferocious chi wave, and pieces of it shattered, turning into crushed stones and flew in all directions. Nie Tian and Shang Mingyu simultaneously felt an extremely strong impact. The two of them received the impact of the heavy pressure and were directly sent flying, heavily smashing on the ground, and slid a few meters on the ground. Chapter 131. Everyone looked at the scene in front of them, collectively petrified. All of them had a dumbfounded expression. No one thought that Nie Tian's strength was actually strong to such an extent. In a head-on confrontation with Shang Mingyu, he was not at a disadvantage at all. Nie Tian and Shang Mingyu were both injured in the clash of extreme moves. They stood up almost at the same time, but their expressions were very different. Shang Mingyu stood up. Looking at Nie Tian, he was even more angry, almost crazy, wishing he could swallow the other party alive. On the other hand, Nie Tian had a calm expression, even a faint smile hanging on the corner of his mouth. Nie Tian was just smiling bitterly at this time. Shang Mingyu was worthy of being a swordsman who had cultivated a sword heart. Even if he cultivated a set of sword techniques that countered his own spirit attribute, his power was still strong. Fortunately, Shang Mingyu's flowing silver sword and the golden sun sword technique countered each other. Otherwise, Nie Tian would definitely be defeated miserably at this moment. The golden sun sword technique was only a high-rank yellow rank sword technique, and it countered Shang Mingyu's flowing silver sword, so it was almost of no help to Shang Mingyu's combat effectiveness. Shang Mingyu was purely using sword chi and sword heart to fight against Nie Tian. Nie Tian was a person who had two kinds of terrifying sword chi, and the proud sword technique was a super heaven rank sword technique. In this case, he was only evenly matched with Shang Mingyu. From this, it could be seen how terrifying the sword heart was. There was a complete qualitative difference between a swordsman with and without sword heart. If Nie Tian cultivated the sword heart at this time, he could definitely kill Shang Mingyu easily. Shang Mingyu, your sword spirit attribute and the golden sun sword technique countered each other. I advise you not to cultivate the golden sun sword technique anymore. If you forcibly cultivate it, not only will it not help your strength, it may even hurt your sword spirit. Nie Tian looked at Shang Mingyu and said lightly. He just saw that Shang Mingyu's sword Dao aptitude was not bad. To be able to cultivate the sword heart before the age of 20, he could already be regarded as a sword Dao genius. But now Shang Mingyu's sword chi sword heart and sword spirit silver sword attributes countered each other. Sword heart and sword spirit. He must abandon one. He could either cultivate another sword art and slowly change the attribute of his sword chi and sword heart, or he could not use the sword spirit in the future. However, the second method wasn't very feasible. After all, after a martial artist reached the giant spirit realm, their origin spirit would condense the giant spirit true body. If a martial artist didn't use the giant spirit true body, their strength would be greatly reduced. Therefore, the best choice in front of Shang Mingyu was to give up on the golden sun sword art and cultivate another sword art. He could use the sword art's attribute to slowly change the sword chi and sword heart attribute. Seeing that Nie Tian was acting like a teacher, Shang Mingyu flew into a rage and roared, "Who do you think you are? You're just a piece of trash that doesn't even have a sword heart. You think you're qualified to teach me a lesson?" Not to mention Shang Mingyu couldn't accept Nie Tian's words. Even the surrounding people couldn't agree with it. After all, Nie Tian was only at the sword chi realm, while Shang Mingyu was born in a sword Dao family and was someone who had cultivated the sword heart. Nie Tian slightly furrowed his brows, and said in a cold tone, "You should be thankful that I can teach you a lesson. You don't know what's good for you. You don't know the difference between life and death." Shang Mingyu couldn't bear it anymore. With a roar of anger, flowing silver attacked once again. With a stab, sword chi spread out several meters. Nie Tian also stabbed out with his sword light filling the air. Once again, the two of them retreated several steps. Nie Tian didn't want to be entangled with Shang Mingyu. It was impossible for the latter to kill him. But if Nie Tian wanted to kill Shang Mingyu, it wouldn't be easy. At the very least, he would need to use one astral soul. Inscribing astral souls used up a lot of Nie Tian's time. Nie Tian treasured every astral soul. Using astral souls on a fool like Shang Mingyu was simply a waste. At this time, a scream suddenly rang out from behind Nie Tian. Nie Tian suddenly turned his head and saw Jean de Bao lying on the ground with a face full of pain, as if he was in great pain. De Bao. From Jean de Bao's body, Nie Tian felt an abnormally tyrannical power stirring. His face immediately changed, and he quickly came to Jean de Bao's side. Jean de Bao screamed again and again, the muscles on his face squeezed together, his expression sinister. What strong power! Nie Tian felt the berserk power in Jean de Bao's body. It was like an enraged beast trying to break free from the shackles of his Yuan spirit. Nie Tian could feel that if he didn't do anything now, the power in Jean de Bao's body would definitely destroy his Yuan meridians and Yuan spirit. Thinking of this, Nie Tian no longer hesitated. Yuan Qi surged to his fingertips, and several strands of Yuan Qi entered Jean de Bao's body, temporarily sealing his major meridians. With Jean de Bao's meridians sealed, his face suddenly turned red, as if someone was covering his mouth and nose, making him unable to breathe. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned by this sudden scene. Jean de Bao was fine just a moment ago. How did he suddenly become like this? Seeing that Nie Tian was completely focused on Jean de Bao, the corners of Shang Mingyu's mouth suddenly rose, and without hesitation, he brazenly attacked. Triple Yang Wild Flow. With a roar, Shang Mingyu attacked without warning, determined to kill Nie Tian with one sword strike. "Teacher, be careful!" Seeing this scene, Zhang Yifeng shouted. His figure moved, actually wanting to block the sword for Nie Tian. Even though Zhang Yifeng's reaction was fast, he was still a step too late. Silver Sword's attack was extremely fast, arriving in the blink of an eye. "Get out of my way!" At this moment, the 10th Yuan meridian in Nie Tian's body suddenly trembled. Surging star energy surged out. War God's 9 layers kill. Nie Tian suddenly stood up, without dodging. Heaven's severing slash slashed out diagonally, and 9 strands of sword chi attacked Shang Mingyu. Everyone was dumbfounded. Who would have thought that Nie Tian would actually choose to fight with his life on the line, a method that would injure both sides? Bam! The triple Yang Wild Flow was like a violent wave in the ocean, striking Nie Tian's chest, instantly sending him flying, blood gushing out like a fountain from his chest. At the same time, the War God's 9 layers kill sword chi struck Shang Mingyu's body, leaving 9 bloody holes on his body. Shang Mingyu was like a sieve, blood spurting out crazily. The War God's 9 layers kill was not a move of the Proud Sword Arts, but a martial skill of the 9 extreme War God Arts. Compared to the Proud Sword Arts, the 9 extreme War God Arts was even more tyrannical and unreasonable. Shang Mingyu hurriedly used his sword chi to seal the bloody holes on his body. Although he managed to stop the flow of blood, he was already extremely weak and almost couldn't stand. Nie Tian received a direct attack from Shang Mingyu and was severely injured, but he got up and walked toward Jean de Bao without looking at Shang Mingyu. Jean de Bao's face was swollen and red, and blood had already seeped out of the 7 orifices on his face. It was as if he was in a narrow space and was enduring an abnormally strong pressure. "Teacher," Zhang Yifeng took a step forward to Nie Tian's side and was quite shocked to see Nie Tian's chest bleeding profusely. "I'm fine." Nie Tian was completely unaware of the injuries on his body, and his eyes wandered around Jean de Bao's body. No one knew what had happened, and they looked nervously at the unconscious Jean de Bayo. Oh no! Nietion suddenly sensed something, and his expression changed drastically. In the next moment, Nietion's heaven/sword stabbed down, piercing small bloody holes on Jean de Bayo's shoulders, thighs, palms, and soles. Fresh blood slowly flowed out of Jean de Bayo's body, and his complexion gradually improved. Chapter 132. Teacher, this... Zhang Yifeng looked at the filthy black blood on the ground and was completely stunned. He had no idea what happened to Jean de Bayo. Let's go. Nietion had a serious look on his face. He didn't care about Shang Mingyu and the others at all. He carried Jean de Bayo and left. Zhang Yifeng carried Jean Mingyu and followed behind Nietion. Shang Mingyu was stunned. Even after Nietion and Zhang Yifeng disappeared, he still had a stupid look on his face. Lan Binji and Qin Yuhu were hidden in the crowd. They had complicated expressions on their faces. Everyone looked at the direction where Nietion disappeared and couldn't come back to their senses for a long time. After a while, Nietion and Zhang Yifeng appeared in the Jean residence's lobby. In the lobby, Jean de Bayo was lying in the middle of the lobby. The swelling on his body had disappeared quite a bit, but his face was still pale like paper. Nietion held onto Jean de Bayo's hand and closed his eyes, carefully checking the condition of Jean de Bayo's body. De Bayo. At this moment, Jean Mingxin rushed over after hearing the news. Mr. Jean, don't worry. Teacher is checking on young Master Jean. Zhang Yifeng hurriedly waved his hand at Jean Mingxin, signaling him not to interrupt Nietion. Seeing Nietion's serious look, Jean Mingxin's heart immediately sank, and he didn't make any sound. Nietion's expression slowly became weirder and weirder. Sometimes he shook his head, sometimes he sighed, and sometimes he revealed a mysterious smile. After a while, more and more people appeared in the lobby. Qiu Shan, Qiu Ling, and Nie Yuro all appeared. After a long time, Nietion finally stopped and slowly stood up. His expression became even more serious. Mr. Nye, is de Bayo okay? Jean Mingxin's heart jumped to his throat. Jean de Bayo was his only son. If anything happened to him, he really didn't know how he was going to live in the future. Nietion didn't say anything. He just slightly shook his head. Big brother Nietion, is Jean de Bayo okay? Say something. Qiu Ling, who was a bit anxious, and shouted. Miss Ling, Mr. Nye is already thinking of a solution. Qiu Shan quickly pulled Qiu Ling back. No one dared to speak loudly again. They all looked at Nietion attentively, waiting for him to speak. Nietion scanned the crowd and finally spoke. Nietion shifted his gaze to Jean Mingxin and said, President Jean, de Bayo's life isn't in danger at the moment, but his condition is very bad. Mr. Nye, is there a problem with de Bayo's origin spirit? Jean Mingxin saw that Nietion wanted to say something, but then hesitated. He knew that Jean de Bayo's situation wasn't optimistic, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Jean Mingxin had always known that there was a problem with Jean de Bayo's origin spirit. However, he originally thought that Jean de Bayo's origin spirit could not increase his strength, but at least it would not endanger his life. Now it seemed that he had been too optimistic. Yes. Nietion nodded and said, I have some questions to ask you. Jean Mingxin only had this one son. As long as he could save Jean de Bayo, not to mention answering questions, he would even die for him. Yes. Jean Mingxin agreed. Please ask, Mr. Nye. As long as I can save de Bayo, I'll do anything you want me to. Nietion sucked in a deep breath and said, regarding Jean de Bayo's origin spirit. When did his origin spirit awaken? When he was 10. Jean Mingxin calculated in his heart. 5 years ago. When Jean Mingxin said this, Qiu Shan and the rest were all stunned. They hadn't thought that Jean de Bayo's origin spirit would awaken so early. Those who could awaken their origin spirit before the age of 10 were all monstrous geniuses. However, looking at Jean de Bayo's huge lump of fat, no one could associate him with a genius no matter what. As expected, Nietion's expression changed. Jean Mingxin's answer was within his expectations. which is to say DeBeo has been stuck at the first level of origin spirit for 5 years. Yes, although he was unwilling to admit this fact, Jean Mingxin still nodded heavily. Remaining stagnant for 5 years after his origin spirit had awakened, probably only a weirdo like Jean DeBeo could do this. Does DeBeo possess sensory abilities that far surpass ordinary people, especially at close range? Even someone who has completely retracted their aura would not be able to hide from him? Nie Tian continued to ask. Yes. Jean Mingxin had a look of surprise on his face. Is indeed so. I understand. Nie Tian nodded slightly, a smile finally appearing on his face. Mr. Nie, have you thought of a way to save DeBeo? Jean Mingxin was extremely agitated, tears almost flowing out of his eyes. Xiao Shan, Zhang Yifeng, Qiu Ling, and Niyuro also looked at Nie Tian with great anticipation. Nie Tian did not answer Jean Mingxin's question, instead saying, if I'm not wrong, DeBeo's origin spirit should be a book. Pausing with a smile, Nie Tian continued, and it's a book that has never been opened before. A book? Other than Jean Mingxin, everyone present was stunned. Martial artists' origin spirits, beast spirits, wood spirits, and weapon spirits were the most common, but book spirits were much rarer. No one would have thought that Jean DeBeo's origin spirit was actually a book. In fact, Nie Tian's origin spirit also had a book spirit, but he had 2 origin spirits, the Primal Chaos original coffin and the Star Soul original book. The Star Soul original book was the book spirit. Jean Mingxin calmed down and nodded. DeBeo's origin spirit is indeed a book called the Blood Scroll of Gods and Demons. Blood Scroll of Gods and Demons. The name of Jean DeBeo's origin spirit was very domineering. Unfortunately, it had not been of any use so far, other than increasing his sensory abilities. Hearing the words Blood Scroll of Gods and Demons, Nie Tian's pupils suddenly shrank. He was a little shocked in his heart, but the corners of his mouth curled up and he laughed strangely. As expected, no wonder the power in DeBeo's body is so strong. It's actually the legendary 3,000 Seals of Gods and Demons. 3,000 Seals of Gods and Demons. Everyone, including Jean Mingxin, had a look of astonishment on their faces. They had no idea what Nie Tian was talking about. The 3,000 Seals of Gods and Demons, one of the 10 strongest seals in the legends. Nie Tian had never seen the 3,000 Seals of Gods and Demons, but he had seen another seal that was on the same level as the 3,000 Seals of Gods and Demons, the demonic heaven-devouring seal. The demonic heaven-devouring seal was a powerful seal that the demon world's sovereign Qi Wuxia Ocean possessed. Back then, when Nie Tian and the demon's sovereign Qi Wuxia Ocean had a life-and-death battle, the latter had used the demonic heaven-devouring seal. As a result, a continent in the day-night celestial realm was completely destroyed, heaven and earth inverted, and space-time collapsed. The entire space had become an abyss of nothingness. After that, that world became known as the demonic heaven-devouring abyss. Until now, the demonic heaven-devouring abyss was still a forbidden area in the day-night celestial realm. The demonic heaven-devouring seal was known as the 10th seal, ranked 10th among the 10 strongest seals. As for the 3,000 Seals of Gods and Demons, it was known as the 9th seal, ranked 9th among the 10 strongest seals. From this, it could be seen that the 3,000 Seals of Gods and Demons was even more terrifying than the demonic heaven-devouring seal. It was just that the 3,000 Seals of Gods and Demons had already disappeared since ancient times. Who would have thought that after several tens of thousands of years, it would actually reappear in the world once more, and it even appeared on Jean DeBeo's body by a freak combination of factors. Chapter 133. Everyone saw Nie Tian's strange expression. One moment he was smiling, the next moment he was worried. They didn't know what he was thinking, so they didn't dare to disturb him. Nie Tian already knew what was going on with Jean DeBeo, but he still didn't know how to deal with the current situation. The 3,000 Demon God Seal was the terrifying power hidden within Jean DeBeo's body. The 3,000 God Fiend Seals were actually a seal that was added to the God Fiend Blood Scroll. It was like a door lock. Only by opening the lock of the 3,000 Fiend God seals could the Fiend God Blood Codex be opened, and Jean de Bayo's strength would increase. It was precisely because the 3,000 Demon God seals had been sealed that Jean de Bayo's strength had not increased in the past 5 years. If today's accident had not happened, the 3,000 Fiend God seals could possibly be sealed forever, and Jean de Bayo would also only be able to forever remain at the first level of the Essence Spirit Realm. However, when Zhang Mingyu's attack landed on Jean de Bayo's body, even though the Golden Lightning battle armor had helped him block the damage, the sword chi had still managed to enter Jean de Bayo's body, stimulating the 3,000 Devil God seals. The thorniest problem was that Jean de Bayo's body was too weak. He was unable to control the 3,000 Demon God seals. This was different from when Nye Tian helped Mo Rushi awaken the Nine Heavens Divine Phoenix's origin spirit. The Divine Phoenix seal in Mo Rushi's body was suppressed by the Nine Heavens Divine Phoenix. So Nye Tian only needed to help Mo Rushi awaken her primordial spirit. He didn't need to suppress the Divine Phoenix seal. But now he had to help Jean de Bayo suppress the 3,000 Demon God seals and slowly open them. If 3,000 seals were to be opened at the same time, unless Jean de Bayo was at the Heavenly Emperor realm, otherwise he would not be able to withstand such a powerful force at all. For the current Jean de Bayo, the most ideal situation was for him to open the 3,000 Godfiend seals one by one. Following the opening of the seal, Jean de Bayo's strength would slowly increase. By the time his strength advanced to the Heavenly Emperor realm, he would be able to withstand the power of 3,000 seals. However, in order to suppress the 3,000 Fiend God seals, one needed a Tier 9 spirit pill or a Tier 9 medicinal herb. At this moment, the 3,000 Demon God seals were only in the active stage and were not very powerful. 10,000-year Ice Soul, Extreme Sea Black Iron, 1,000 Leaves Sapphire, and Extreme Purple Heavenly Crow. These Tier 9 herbs could easily suppress the 3,000 Fiend God seals. Unfortunately, these 9th-grade medicinal herbs were extremely rare, let alone a third-rate empire like the Blue Cloud Empire. Even in the Shumi world or the heavenly realm of the gods, they were extremely rare. Without a doubt, even if Nye Tian turned the entire Minor Sumer world upside down, he would not be able to find a Tier 9 medicinal herb. Mr. Nye, please save de Bayo. Seeing that Nye Tian's eyebrows were furrowed, Jean Mingxin couldn't control her emotions any longer and burst into tears. Nye Tian quickly supported Jean Mingxin and said, "Don't worry, President Jean. De Bayo is my good brother. I will definitely save him." In this short period of time, Nye Tian had long regarded Jean de Bayo as one of his own. Even if Jean Mingxin didn't beg him, he would still save them. Moreover, the 3,000 demon and god seals in Jean de Bayo's body were stimulated by Zhang Mingyu's sword chi, which was why they became active. Speaking of which, Nye Tian had some responsibility for this matter as well. Thus, no matter what price he had to pay, Nye Tian would definitely save Jean de Bayo. Jean de Bayo's situation was indeed very thorny. If he didn't deal with it immediately, he might not even be able to survive today. Nye Tian's gaze swept across everyone, and suddenly, his gaze landed on Zhang Yifeng. He suddenly thought of something that could temporarily suppress the 3,000 demon and god seals. Demonic fire. That's right. It was the demonic fire within Zhang Yifeng's body. Doomsday Flame. Doomsday Flame, demonic fire ranked 13th on the demonic fire list. It was refined from the heart of Doomsday Volcano's lava, and after absorbing 10,000 years of baleful aura, its demonic nature was extremely strong. It was rumored that it had the might to burn the heavens and the earth. Although the demonic fire within Zhang Yifeng's body wasn't the main body of Doomsday Flame, the 3,000 demon and god seals were not completely stimulated. Thus, Zhang Yifeng could use the demonic fire within Zhang Yifeng's body to temporarily suppress the 3,000 demon and god seals. Teacher this. Zhang Yifeng sensed that Nye Tian had been looking at him all along, and sweat couldn't help but form on his forehead. He was a bit at a loss as to what to do. Nie Tian's expression turned stern as he said, with a serious expression, Yifeng, teacher wants to ask for something from you to save Debao. Are you willing? Seeing that Nie Tian's expression was serious, Zhang Yifeng couldn't help but gulp down his saliva. Soon after, he knelt down and said, Teacher, as long as this disciple has it, I can give it to teacher, even if it is my life. All right. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, I want your demonic fire. Demonic fire? Zhang Yifeng went into a daze, and soon after, he let out a sigh of relief. Seeing that Nie Tian had a serious expression on his face, he thought that Nie Tian wanted to borrow his head. Demonic fire wasn't as important as life, but it was still very important. Without demonic fire, Zhang Yifeng might not be able to have any achievements in the field of alchemy in the future. The reason why he was able to become a third realm alchemist at such a young age was all because of the demonic fire. Once he loses the demonic fire, he would lose his biggest support. Nie Tian, of course, knew what Zhang Yifeng was thinking. He said softly, Yifeng, I will now officially accept you as my direct disciple. Are you willing? Zhang Yifeng was a little shocked, but he quickly reacted. He was so excited that he kowtowed and shouted, This disciple is willing. After being Nie Tian's disciple for so long, Zhang Yifeng had already seen how powerful Nie Tian was. He had always been thinking about how to become Nie Tian's official disciple. Now that he had become a direct disciple, how could he not be excited? In Nie Tian's past life, he had many disciples, but he only had 9 direct disciples. Tang Hao, who had an unknown relationship with Tang 13, was his 9th direct disciple. And Zhang Yifeng was going to become his 10th direct disciple. Zhang Yifeng wasn't stupid. In fact, he was very smart. In front of everyone, he immediately knelt down 3 times and kowtowed 9 times in front of Nie Tian to become his disciple. Nie Tian attached great importance to this etiquette. After the ceremony of acknowledging him as his master, after the ceremony, it meant that Zhang Yifeng was officially his direct disciple. Zhang Yifeng's achievements in the future and his future path were all Nie Tian's responsibility. Nie Tian wouldn't easily accept a disciple, and he definitely wouldn't accept a direct disciple. To be able to become Nie Tian's direct disciple, Zhang Yifeng's ancestors burned incense and accumulated a lot of good karma. Nie Tian gestured for Zhang Yifeng to stand up. He said in a serious tone, Very good. From now on, you are my 10th direct disciple. 10th. Zhang Yifeng and everyone else of the scene were shocked. Who would have thought that at such a young age, Nie Tian would have so many disciples? Teacher, could it be that I have 9 brothers? Zhang Yifeng couldn't hide his excitement. He didn't doubt Nie Tian's words at all. Nie Tian nodded. Then, with a smile, he said, The first gift I'm going to give you is a promise. A promise? Everyone was curious. They didn't know what Nie Tian would say next. Chapter 134. Devil Fire List? Devil Fire Origin Body? Hearing Nie Tian's words, Jin Mingxin and the others were baffled. They did not know what Nie Tian was talking about, nor did they know how terrifying Nie Tian's promise was. But Zhang Yifeng knew what Nie Tian's promise meant. Devil Flame, this was something that every alchemist yearned for in their dreams. In ancient times, the Alchemist Guild collected information on all the devil fires in the world and compiled it into a devil fire list. The devil fire list recorded thousands of devil fires. Among them, being able to obtain a devil fire that was not ranked in the top 100 was enough for a pill refiner to be proud. To be able to obtain a devil fire in the top 100 of the devil fire list, all of them were grandmasters of the pill Dao world. Zhang Yifeng once heard that the president of the 3,000 Small Worlds Alchemist Guild only had a devil fire that was ranked 83rd. Nie Tian promised him a devil fire that was ranked in the top 10, and it was the devil fire origin body. Zhang Yifeng felt as if a huge pile of dog shit had fallen from the sky and smashed on his head. If he had to use a sentence to describe his current mood, it would be that happiness came too suddenly. Yifeng, you can rest assured. Master will definitely keep his promise. Nie Tian looked at Zhang Yifeng, who was still in a daze, and said indifferently, Disciple, thanks, Master. Zhang Yifeng was so excited that his body was trembling and his voice was trembling. Nie Tian only nodded and said, "Now, transfer the devil fire in your body to Debeo's body." Giving such a grand promise to Zhang Yifeng, Nie Tian was only giving him compensation for stripping the devil fire in his body. But this compensation was indeed a bit too much. Zhang Yifeng's body was only a remnant flame of the Doomsday Flame, and the Doomsday Flame was only ranked 13th. Nie Tian was indeed generous to promise Zhang Yifeng a devil fire that was ranked in the top 10. Zhang Yifeng came to Jean Debeo's side and circulated the Yuan meridians in his body to the extreme. Surging Yuan qi gathered in his palm and formed a white flame that was about a meter long. When the demonic flame, Doomsday Flame, appeared, the surrounding temperature immediately rose by dozens of degrees. Everyone felt a scorching heat, burning them to the point of pain. However, the Doomsday Flames did not harm Zhang Yifeng at all. After using the method that Nie Tian taught him, Zhang Yifeng was able to control the Doomsday Flame freely. As long as he infused the flames in his palm into Jean Debeo's body, the Doomsday Flames would change owners. After hesitating for a moment, Zhang Yifeng waved his palm, and the pale, white fireball flew out. It stopped on Jean Debeo's body for a moment before being absorbed. The 3,000 god and demon seals were like a monster, eager to devour all energy. Jean Mingxin's face paled. He was truly worried that the Doomsday Flame would harm Jean Debeo. Fortunately, after the Doomsday Flame fused into Jean Debeo's body, the latter finally woke up. "Dad, what happened?" Jean Debeo's head felt heavy, and he slowly stood up. Seeing everyone staring at him, he couldn't help being startled. "Debeo, my son, you're finally awake." Jean Mingxin couldn't hide his excitement. He hugged his son tightly, tears streaming down his face. When the others saw that Jean Debeo had woken up, they also heaved a sigh of relief. Nie Tian saw that Zhang Yifeng was very weak and motioned for him to go back and rest first. Seeing Zhang Yifeng leave, Nie Tian immediately turned his gaze to Jean Debeo. Jean Debeo had absorbed the power of the Doomsday Flame. His body simultaneously contained the 3,000 god and demon seals and the Doomsday Flame. Therefore, in the following period of time, Jean Debeo's strength would rapidly increase. However, the Doomsday Flame would soon be completely absorbed by the 3,000 god and demon seals. At that time, Jean Debeo would once again fall into today's situation. "Debeo, the 3,000 god and demon seals in your body have already been opened. I believe that your origin spirit and demon blood scroll have also been opened. Do you feel anything strange now?" Nie Tian stepped forward and asked. "Oh, it's true. My origin spirit and demon blood scroll has been opened." Jean Debeo was pleasantly surprised and said excitedly, "I feel like my whole body has endless power. It's like I can knock down a rank 2 spirit beast with one punch." Nie Tian nodded slightly. The 3,000 god and demon seals were opened. Coupled with the power of the Doomsday Flame, it was very normal for Jean Debeo to feel bursting with power. The Doomsday Flame had a suppressive effect on the 3,000 god and demon seals. But this kind of suppression could not last for long. It would be thoroughly devoured by the 3,000 god and demon seals very soon. At that time, the seals would become berserk again. Nie Tian estimated that the Doomsday Flame could at most last for a month's time. After all, the Doomsday Flame in Jean Debeo's body was not the demonic fire's main body. A month's time, Nie Tian must find something that could suppress the 3,000 god and demon seals within a month. Otherwise, Jean Debeo's life would be in danger at any time. "Mr. Nie, Master Zhang Yifeng has already helped Debeo fuse with the demonic fire. Is Debeo already fine?" Jean Mingxin saw that Nie Tian's expression was still solemn and asked probingly. Nie Tian shook his head and did not hide anything. He said, "The effect of the demonic fire will not last long. At most, it will last for a month." "A month?" Jean Mingxin's face changed. He was stunned. "What about after a month?" Nie Tian said lightly, "Don't worry, I will find a way to suppress the seal within a month." Thank you, Mr. Nya. Jean Mingxin bowed deeply. His gratitude was beyond words. Nye Tian nodded with a smile. He knew in his heart that it was very difficult to find something that could suppress the 3,000 god and demon seals. Especially in the 3,000 small worlds, it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Maybe I can ask him for help? Nye Tian's mind moved. He suddenly thought of a person, Gu Yi. Gu Yi was the mysterious old man that Nye Tian met in the black market Dan Xian Pavilion. So far, Nye Tian did not know Gu Yi's true strength, but he should at least be a 5th-stage alchemist or even higher. A 5th-stage alchemist was already considered a top alchemist in the 3,000 small worlds. For such an alchemy grandmaster to live in the black market of a third-rate empire, there must be a reason behind it. Nye Tian told Jean de Bayo to cultivate in seclusion. The higher his strength, the stronger his resistance against the 3,000 god and demon seals. Jean de Bayo's matter could only be dealt with in this way. Next, Nye Tian could not focus on cultivation. He could only focus on finding the item that could suppress the 3,000 god and demon seals for Jean de Bayo. Everyone left. Nye Tian brought Nyuro, Xiao Shan, and Xiao Ling back to his courtyard. Xiao Shan, are your injuries healed? Nye Tian saw that Xiao Shan's complexion was good and asked with a smile. Xiao Shan nodded heavily. His heart was filled with anticipation. Nye Tian naturally knew what he was thinking. He said, since your injuries are healed, let me heal your Yuan Meridian. Now, Xiao Shan was stunned. He thought that Nye Tian would need to prepare carefully before healing his Yuan Meridian. Now, Nye Tian nodded slightly. Although Xiao Shan's Yuan Meridian was a hidden injury that had lasted for more than 20 years, it was nothing to Nye Tian. Chapter 135. In the room, Nye Tian let out a deep breath and put away the 12 silver needles. Mr. Nye, my Yuan Meridians have recovered. Xiao Shan looked inside his body and found that all 9 of his Yuan Meridians had recovered. The shock in his heart was written all over his face. Nye Tian had only inserted 12 silver needles into his hands, feet, shoulders, back, thighs, and knees. Then he felt a numbing sensation all over his body. Moments later, when Nye Tian pulled out all the needles, his Yuan Meridians had recovered. Everything was too miraculous. Xiao Shan couldn't imagine how Nye Tian had done it. Xiao Shan's Yuan Meridians had been treated by many pill refiners, but all of them thought it was incurable and even advised Xiao Shan to give up. Such a stubborn disease, in the hands of Nye Tian, was as easy as eating and drinking. He was cured with 2 or 3 needles. Actually, Xiao Shan didn't know that the technique Nye Tian used was acupuncture with silver needles, a lost technique from the medieval era. Nye Tian had unintentionally found it in an ancient book. Acupuncture with silver needles could basically treat all Yuan Meridian injuries. Not to mention damaged Yuan Meridians. Even broken Yuan Meridians could be healed by acupuncture with silver needles. Nye Tian's expression was indifferent as he smiled. Xiao Shan, your Yuan Meridians have recovered. Right now, the energy accumulated in your Dantian is very abundant. Therefore, your strength will soar in the coming period. You'd better be prepared. Xiao Shan's Yuan Meridians have been damaged for 25 years. During this time, his strength hadn't improved at all. However, Xiao Shan obviously didn't stop cultivating, hoping for a miracle. In the past 25 years, the heaven and earth spirit energy that Xiao Shan had absorbed had all accumulated in his Dantian and not been absorbed by his Yuan Meridians. Now that his Yuan Meridians had recovered, the heaven and earth spirit energy was like a flood that had broken a dam. Xiao Shan's strength would definitely soar. Nye Tian estimated that with Xiao Shan's talent, his strength would at least reach the giant spirit realm after a month after his Yuan Meridians had finished digesting the heaven and earth spirit energy in his Dantian. He might even break through to the higher levels of the giant spirit realm. Xiao Shan's current strength was at the first level of the Wanxiang realm, but this was his strength from 25 years ago. He used to be the rookie king of Tyrant Cloud, so his aptitude in martial arts was definitely excellent. Advancing a large realm in 25 years was already Nye Tian's most conservative estimate for Xiao Shan. Mr. Nye, Qiu face suddenly became solemn. He knelt on one knee in front of Nietian and said in a clear voice, "Mister's great kindness to Qiu Shan is unable to repay. Mister, please allow Qiu Shan to stay by Mister's side. Qiu Shan is willing to serve Mister as a servant." After saying that, Qiu Shan knelt down. He had once said that if Nietian could cure his hidden illness, he was willing to serve Nietian as a servant for 10 years. However, he now understood that being able to stay by Nietian's side was definitely not a bad thing. On the contrary, it was a great thing. In fact, Qiu Shan once had the thought of worshipping Nietian as his master. However, when he thought that even a genius alchemy like Zhang Yifeng could only be an unofficial disciple of Nietian, he gave up on the idea. To be able to stay by Nietian's side, Qiu Shan was already satisfied, even if it was to be the latter's follower. Seeing that Qiu Shan was sincere, Nietian couldn't reject him. He signaled the latter to stand up and said, "Qiu Shan, if you want to stay by my side, I won't oppose it. However, we are not master and servant, but friends." Qiu Shan's face was filled with astonishment. He didn't expect Nietian to say such a thing. This made him feel extremely flattered. To be able to become friends with someone like Nietian, Qiu Shan couldn't ask for more. "Thank you, mister." Qiu Shan stood up and bowed. Nietian smiled faintly. He suddenly thought of something and said, "Qiu Shan, I will be leaving the Jin residence for a period of time. During this period of time, you will be responsible for my ninth sister's safety. Is that all right?" "Where are you going, mister?" Qiu Shan was slightly startled. Nietian didn't hide anything and said, "Debao's situation isn't optimistic. I must find a way to suppress the 3,000 seals of gods and demons within a month." Qiu Shan nodded and said solemnly, "Mister, don't worry. Qiu Shan will definitely protect Miss Euro's safety. Even if I die, I won't let anyone hurt Miss Euro. With these words, I can rest assured." Nietian smiled faintly and opened the door. In the small courtyard, Qiu Ling, and Nie Euro were waiting. The two girls were playing with little Pichio. Unfortunately, little Pichio was in a deep sleep. No matter how much the two girls touched it, it wouldn't open its eyes. "Uncle Qiu Shan, are you done?" Qiu Ling saw Qiu Shan and Nietian walking out and was pleasantly surprised. "Miss Ling, Mr. Nie's technique is exquisite and unparalleled." "I am done." Qiu Shan nodded and said, "Ling, thanks big brother Nietian." Qiu Ling was extremely grateful and thanked him excitedly. Thanks big brother Nietian." On the other side, Nieyuro also mimicked Qiu Ling's voice and posture and said mischievously. Nietian stepped forward and pinched Nieyuro's red cheeks. He smiled and said, "Euro, what are you thanking me for?" Nieyuro hugged little Guai tightly and said seriously, "Thank you, big brother Nietian, for giving Ro the spiritual pill. Ro is already an essence spirit warrior. You've awakened your essence spirit," Nietian exclaimed. His divine sense swept across Nieyuro, and his expression instantly became sluggish. "Oh my God, Ro, how old are you? You've actually awakened your essence spirit." Qiu Ling was also shocked and shouted. Qiu Shan stood rooted to the ground and was completely dumbfounded. Nieyuro waved her pink hand in front of Nietian and giggled. "Big brother Nietian, what's wrong with you guys? Ro is already 9 years old. Is it strange to awaken your essence spirit?" 9 years old. Awakened her essence spirit at 9 years old. She was practically a monster. Jean de Bao awakened his essence spirit at 10 years old. Everyone already felt that it was unbelievable, let alone Nieyuro, who awakened her essence spirit at 9 years old. For a martial artist to awaken their essence spirit, they had to first awaken 9 elemental meridians. Generally speaking, those who could awaken 9 elemental meridians before the age of 20 were less than 1 in 100. Those who could awaken 9 elemental meridians before the age of 15 were already rare geniuses. Hence, Nietian was already the #1 genius of Moyang City when he awakened 9 elemental meridians at the age of 13. Nieyuro awakened her essence spirit at the age of 9. This talent was comparable to Nietion in his previous life. In his previous life, the god of war, Nieton, also awakened his essence spirit at the age of 9. Euro, release your essence spirit, and let me have a look. After a while, Nietion finally regained his senses. Suppressing the shock in his heart, he said excitedly. Qiu and Qiu also stared at Euro, obviously looking forward to it. A monster who awakened her essence spirit at the age of 9. Her essence spirit must be very terrifying. Euro pouted, appearing a bit bashful as she said, "Can I not look?" Nietion was even more interested. He shook his head and said no. "All right then. You guys are not allowed to laugh at Rower." Euro's small face puffed up, looking a little embarrassed. She circulated her elemental energy, and the essence spirit in her body sensed it. A pink shadow appeared behind her. Chapter 136. Everyone stared blankly at Euro's original soul, speechless for a long time. The pink shadow had short and thin forelimbs, thick and long hind limbs. 2 large ears were raised in the air, and its entire body exuded a faint pink glow. There was even a faint fragrance wafting through the air. Rower, your original soul, is actually a pink rabbit? Finally, Qiu could not hold it in any longer and exclaimed in shock. That's right, Euro's original soul was a rabbit, and a pink one at that. A flowing color demon rabbit. The flowing color demon rabbit did not seem to have any offensive power, much less any deterrent power. Instead, it gave off a very cute and kawaii feeling. Qiu brows furrowed, unable to accept the reality in front of him. Nietion's expression was very strange as he continued to observe the flowing color demon rabbit. Although at first glance, the flowing color demon rabbit did not seem like anything special, Nietion could sense that its original soul aptitude was very high, at least above the 6th level. However, he did not have a Yuan soul wheel, so he could not know the specific origin spirit aptitude of the flowing color demon rabbit. What surprised Nietion the most was the faint pink glow that enveloped the flowing color demon rabbit's body. Nietion guessed that Euro's flowing color demon rabbit's original soul was most likely of the 9 elements, and it also had a bit of the wind attribute. The 9 elements of heaven and earth were metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, lightning, light, and darkness. A martial artist's original soul was usually of the 5 elements, which were metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Very few people had the wind and lightning attribute, and 1 in a million had the light and darkness attributes. Euro's flowing color demon rabbit was actually a light and wind attribute dual element original soul. Its potential was unimaginable. Nietion's previous life's original soul, the 9 extreme beast, was of a lightning attribute and had extremely strong offensive power. A light attribute original soul was even more terrifying than a lightning attribute original soul. Moreover, the flowing color demon rabbit had a second attribute, the wind attribute. If Euro could cultivate a suitable martial technique, she would definitely be able to reach the Heavenly Emperor realm in the future and become a very powerful Heavenly Emperor at that. My little sister, you might really become a peerless martial artist in the future. Nietion's lips curled up, his heart filled with joy. He suddenly recalled Euro's words. Big brother Nietion, Ro will protect you when she grows up. Perhaps that day will really come. Nietion looked at Euro, his heart already filled with a lot of anticipation. Brother Nietion, is Ro's original spirit not good? When Euro saw that everyone was staring at her in a daze, she immediately became worried. Her face was filled with grievance, making her look exceptionally cute. Of course not. Nietion stroked Euro's little head, resolutely saying, Ro's origin spirit is extremely powerful. Big brother Nietion will need to rely on Ro to protect you in the future. Really? Euro's eyes flashed like black gems, filled with pleasant surprise. It's absolutely true. Big brother Nietion never lies. Nietion smiled faintly. Then Ro-Air can rest assured. Nyeyuro nodded her head heavily. The stone in her heart finally lifted. Nyeyuro had awakened her origin spirit, but Nyetian was now faced with another problem. He needed to find a suitable martial technique for Nyeyuro. With Nyeyuro's talent in the martial way, she definitely needed a high-rank martial technique, at least a heaven rank one. Otherwise, it would be a waste of her talent. Unfortunately, Nyetian did not have a suitable martial technique on hand. At the very least, he did not have a suitable martial technique for Nyeyuro. I'll think of something later. Right now, the most important thing is to solve Debeo's problem, Nyetian said in his heart. No matter what, he would definitely find a suitable martial technique for Nyeyuro. Ro-Air, I will be leaving for a period of time. While I'm not here, stay with Uncle Chioshan and Big Sister Ling-Air. They will protect your safety. Is that okay? Nyetian decided to tell Nyeyuro first, lest she worry. Nyeyuro nodded obediently, saying, Ro-Air understands. Big Brother Fatty is sick. Big Brother Nyetian wants to find something to cure Big Brother Fatty's illness. Nyeyuro was very smart. She actually guessed what Nyetian was going to do. As Nyeyuro said this, she handed Little Guai to Nyetian and said, Big Brother Nyetian, take Little Guai with you. Little Guai is very powerful. Last time when Ro-Air was captured by bad guys, it was Little Guai who protected Ro-Air. That's why the bad guys did not bully Ro-Air. Nyetian was slightly stunned. He did not expect Nyeyuro to be so obedient and sensible. Little Pichio was, after all, an ancient spiritual beast with limitless potential. Once it grew up, it would be comparable to a heavenly emperor powerhouse. Although Little Guai was only a month old, it already had very strong combat strength. The key was that the power of ice in its body was very domineering. Even Manifestation Realm martial artists did not dare to underestimate it. Then I thank Ro-Air. Nyetian took Little Guai and smiled faintly. Immediately, Nyetian gave Chioshan a few more instructions and then left the Jin residence. After leaving the Jin residence, Nyetian walked directly to Wu City. After a moment, Nyetian's figure arrived at the entrance of the black market. Nyetian came to the black market to find Gu Yi for a chat, hoping to obtain some important information from this mysterious old man. Gu Yi's attainments in the Tao of Alchemy were very high. There must be some hidden story behind him holing up in Blue Cloud City's black market. Entering the black market, Nyetian was not nervous in the slightest. He currently had 4 star souls on him. Even if he encountered an assassin like Tang Yuyu again, he would not be afraid. Although Nyetian only had the strength of a 7th level origin spirit, he had the confidence to deal with an enemy with the strength of a 9th level manifestation realm. In a small place like Blue Cloud City, a 9th level manifestation realm was already a peak powerhouse. It was very rare. When Nyetian entered the Danhart Pavilion, the first thing he saw was the purple dragon whisker placed in the center. It seemed like Gu Yi was very satisfied with the purple dragon whisker. Otherwise, he would not have placed it in such an eye-catching position. Young Master Nya, you're here. Once again, Gu Yi appeared behind Nyetian without anyone noticing. His goatee curled up high, appearing somewhat pleased with himself. You knew that I would return? Nyetian smiled faintly. Looking at Gu Yi's appearance, the latter seemed to have expected that he would return. Furthermore, he was very much looking forward to his arrival. Sort of. Gu Yi laughed brightly and said, There was a young pill refinement master beside you last time. His body had the aura of the devil fire apocalypse flame. At that time, this old man could already tell that the devil fire in his body showed faint signs of agitation. I believe that he's already unable to suppress it now. Nyetian saw Gu Yi's unfathomable look. Clearly, he was intentionally putting on the appearance of an otherworldly expert. Sadly, the target of his posturing was wrong. Nyetian was the true otherworldly expert. Nyetian looked at Gu Yi's appearance and instantly understood. Gu Yi definitely thought that the devil fire in Zhang Yifeng's body could not be suppressed anymore. Hence, he came to seek help. Back then, Zhang Yifeng had just suppressed the devil fire not long ago. Therefore, it was nothing strange for Gu Yi to be able to detect the aura of the devil fire in his body. Actually, Gu Yi also merely detected that there was devil fire in Zhang Yifeng's body. The rest were all his own conjectures. Chapter 137. You didn't come because of the demonic fire? Gu Yi looked at Nie Tian in astonishment, expressing his doubt. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, I have already solved the demonic fire's problem. There's no need for Gu Yi to worry about me. Gu Yi frowned. The wrinkles on his face were about to fold into a paper airplane, appearing to be a little disappointed. Nie Tian didn't care too much about it and said, The reason why I came to visit Gu Yi this time is because I want to know, in the Blue Cloud Empire or the nearby empires, where can I find a 9th-ranked medicinal herb or a 9th-ranked spirit pill? 9th-ranked spirit pill. Who knew that once Nie Tian said this, Gu Yi would jump up and cry out in shock, as if he was stung by a hornet. He suddenly went up and covered Nie Tian's forehead, saying in all seriousness, Young man, you can't be having a fever, right? Nie Tian pushed away Gu Yi's claws and said indifferently, It's just a 9th-ranked medicinal herb and a 9th-ranked spirit pill. Is there a need to make such a big fuss? Make a big fuss? Gu Yi shrieked again, laughing weirdly. Young man, do you know in the entire small summer world, there's never been a 9th-ranked medicinal herb, and no one has ever refined a 9th-ranked spirit pill. Gu Yi had a face of wanting to continue, saying angrily, In the small summer world, the pinnacle of alchemists is a 6th-ranked alchemist. No one has even seen a 7th-ranked spirit pill. This old man has lived for more than 200 years, and until now, I have never seen a 9th-ranked medicinal herb. The moment you open your mouth, you want to know about 9th-ranked medicinal herb or spirit pill. How can I not make a fuss over nothing? Nie Tian's face was filled with black lines. He indeed didn't think of this point. The small Sumeru world was only a lower-level world of the Sumeru world, and the Sumeru world was a lower-level world of the Heaven Realm. 9th-ranked medicinal herb or spirit pill was already rare in the Heaven Realm. So how could it be found in the small Sumeru world? Thinking of this, Nie Tian couldn't help but frown. The matter was much more troublesome than he thought. Based on Gu Yi's words, even if he turned the entire mini Sumeru world upside down, he definitely wouldn't be able to find Tier 9 medicinal herbs or Tier 9 spirit pills. Young Master Nya, why do you want a Tier 9 spirit pill? Gu Yi suddenly smiled strangely when he saw the worry on Nie Tian's face. I have a friend who was born with a powerful seal in his body. Now that the seal has been activated, he needs to suppress it in order to survive. Jean de Bayo's matter was very urgent, so Nie Tian did not hide too much. Innate seal. Gu Yi's expression immediately became nervous. Just what kind of seal would require a rank 9 spirit pill to suppress it? Seals were also divided into levels, from level 1 to level 9. A seal that required a rank 9 spirit pill to suppress was at least a rank 8 or rank 9 spirit pill. It's a very powerful seal. Nie Tian didn't say it clearly and only vaguely. The 3,000 Demon God seals was one of the 10 strongest seals. It wasn't a Tier 8 seal, nor a Tier 9 seal, but a Tier 10 seal. The 10 strongest seals, every single one of them surpassed the existence of a Tier 9 seal, so they were called Tier 10 seals. Nie Tian didn't tell this news to Gu Yi because he was afraid of scaring him. Now it seemed that Nie Tian had overestimated Gu Yi. The pinnacle of pill masters in the mini-Sumer world were only at the Tier 6 standard. That Gu Yi was at most a Tier 6 pill master. A Tier 6 pill master was indeed very powerful, but to Nie Tian, it was of no use, at least not now. Gu Yi, you're a Tier 6 pill master, right? Nie Tian still didn't give up and asked. Gu Yi smiled awkwardly and said, I used to be. What about now? Nie Tian saw that Gu Yi's face was troubled, but he still asked. At most, I'm at the level of a Tier 5 pill master. Gu Yi nodded his head solemnly. Nie Tian nodded his head. It was obvious that something must have happened to Gu Yi, but he didn't ask too much. After all, everyone had their own secrets. Gu Yi, I'll take my leave. Since Gu Yi couldn't help, Nie Tian didn't stay any longer and turned to leave. Young Master Nye. Gu Yi suddenly called out to Nie Tian. Nie Tian turned his head and saw Gu Yi's hesitant face, as if he was thinking about something. Gu Yi hesitated for a long time, but finally asked, "Your friend Seal can only be suppressed with a Tier 9 spirit pill? Gu Yi, if you have something to say, just say it." Gu Yi obviously had something to say, so Nie Tian naturally wouldn't be polite. Gu Yi stared at Nie Tian for a long time, as if trying to confirm something. Finally, he chose to speak and said, "Has young Master Nie heard of the Doomsday Flame?" Doomsday Flame? Nie Tian was slightly stunned, but asked in reply, "The Demon Fire ranked 13th on the Demon Fire list." That's right. All alchemists knew of the existence of the Demon Fire list, so Nie Tian's reaction didn't arouse Gu Yi's suspicions. Gu Yi said, "Doomsday Flame, ranked 13th on the Demon Fire list. It's rumored that it has the power to burn the heavens and earth." Nie Tian nodded slightly, waiting for Gu Yi to continue. Gu Yi took out a gray sheepskin scroll and unfolded it in front of Nie Tian. It was actually a map, but there was a white halo flowing on it from time to time. "This is Demon Fire Diagram." Nie Tian looked at the map in Gu Yi's hand and was quite surprised. Gu Yi was even more surprised, looking at Nie Tian with a stunned expression, and only said after a long time, "You actually know about the Demon Fire Diagram?" Demon Fire Diagram. Nie Tian naturally knew about it. It was rumored that an ancient God Realm alchemist had sensed the distribution of the Demon Fire in the world and drew a map of the Demon Fire distribution. After that, God Realm alchemist finished drawing the Demon Fire Diagram. He worked hard and died of exhaustion. The most amazing thing about the Demon Fire Diagram was not that it marked the location of the Demon Fire, but that it could sense the location of all the Demon Fire and update the map at any time. The Demon Fire was born from heaven and earth, and had existed in the world for tens of thousands of years. The Demon Fire had a very high intelligence, and would not stay in the same place. Their movements were erratic, and very few people could discover their whereabouts. The Demon Fire was the favorite of alchemists, artifact refiners, and spirit array masters, and it was something that everyone dreamed of. Different Demon Fires had different characteristics, and they could bring out the characteristics of spirit pills, spirit weapons, or spirit arrays to an extremely terrifying degree. However, the Demon Fire was an extremely violent existence, and the difficulty of fusing with the Demon Fire was beyond imagination. Since ancient times, there were countless people who tried to fuse with the Demon Fire, but the majority of them were devoured by the Demon Fire, and in the end, their souls were destroyed. There were very few people who could successfully fuse with the Demon Fire, but every one of them was an existence that shocked the past and present. Nie Tian once had the chance to fuse with the 7th Demon Fire, Moth Dragon Heavenly Flame, but at that time, he was proud and arrogant and only thought about the boundary of the first Demon Fire universe. So he gave up on fusing with the Moth Dragon Heavenly Flame. After that, he wanted to find the Moth Dragon Heavenly Flame, but he could not find it anymore. Because the Demon Fire's movements were erratic, the legendary Demon Fire Diagram became the world's most precious treasure. According to the rumors, the Demon Fire Diagram was completely destroyed during the last great war of gods and demons in the ancient times. There was another rumor that the Demon Fire Diagram was not destroyed, but it was cut into countless pieces and scattered across the world. Alchemists and artifact refiners tended to believe the latter rumor, because it could give people unlimited hope. When Nie Tian was in the Heaven Realm, he had seen a piece of the Demon Fire Diagram in the hands of the president of the Alchemist Guild, so he always knew that the Demon Fire Diagram was not destroyed and still existed. Chapter 138. At this moment, Nie Tian couldn't help but feel excited. Never in his dreams did he think that he would actually be able to see the Demon Fire Diagram in this kind of place. The Demon Fire Diagram recorded the top 100 Demon Fires on the Demon Fire list. The Demon Fire Diagram could automatically sense the existence of the Demon Fire and draw out the hiding place of the Demon Fire at any time. Nie Tian saw that on the Demon Fire Diagram, white halos were slowly circulating, gradually drawing out a map. Then, all of the halos converged at one point and flickered on the Demon Fire Diagram. This is... Nie Tian looked at the map in front of him and felt that it was incomparably familiar. His expression immediately changed as he said in astonishment, "This is Blue Cloud Empire." The map of Blue Cloud Empire appeared on the demon fire diagram. This undoubtedly meant that the demon fire was in Blue Cloud Empire. Gui looked at the excited expression on Nietion's face and only faintly smiled and said, "Young Master Nye, please take a closer look." Since Gui had already taken out the demon fire diagram, he naturally didn't want to hide anything. He could tell that Nietion wasn't the kind of person who would forget righteousness at the sight of profit and would definitely not covet his demon fire diagram. That was why he dared to take out such a precious thing. Nietion carefully observed the demon fire diagram. His gaze wandered around the place where the halos converged. Suddenly, he discovered an important piece of information, causing his entire body to stiffen. Seeing Nietion's reaction, Gui already knew that Nietion had seen through the clues on the demon fire diagram. He said, "Young Master Nye, your observation is correct. The demon fire is in Blue Cloud City, and it is in Tyrant Cloud Academy." Nietion had an astonished look on his face. He only reacted after a long while. Just now, after looking at the map for a long time, he discovered that the place where the halos converged was actually Blue Cloud City, and it was in Tyrant Cloud Academy. At this moment, Nietion finally knew why Gui would hide in a place like Blue Cloud Empire. It turned out that it was for the demon fire. Looking at the location of the demon fire diagram, it should be in Tyrant Cloud mountain range. Nietion calmed down and said while pointing at the demon fire diagram. At this moment, he was already calculating in his heart. If he could obtain the demon fire, he would definitely be able to suppress the demon fire within Jean de Bayo's body. However, the demonic fire diagram was in Gui's hands. Furthermore, this old fellow had prepared for such a long time for the demonic fire and did not even hesitate to hide in a place like the black market. Clearly, he would not hand over the demonic fire so easily. Nietion did not want to snatch Gui's devil fire diagram, but he had an idea in his heart. Gui had been hiding in the black market for a long time, but he had not made a move on the demonic fire. This meant that he must have encountered some difficulties. Otherwise, he wouldn't have waited until now. Yes. Gui put away the demon fire diagram and nodded. The demon fire is indeed in the Tyrant Cloud mountain range, and it is in a forbidden area of the mountain range. Old Gui, do you know which demonic fire this is? Nietion pretended to be nonchalant as he asked with a smile. The 13th demon fire, Doomsday Flame, Gui said, pointing to the back of the demon fire diagram. At this time, Nietion saw that there were a few small words on the back of the demon fire diagram. 13th demon fire. Nietion still remembered that the demon fire diagram he had seen in the heaven realm had the words 3rd demon fire on its back. From the looks of it, the devil fire diagram had been divided into 100 parts, and each part contained a type of devil fire, which just so happened to be the top 100 devil fires on the devil fire list. Gui then said, "The young alchemist beside you, the devil fire in his body, is only a wisp of remnant flame from the doomsday flame. His luck is really good, to be able to successfully fuse with the remnant flames of the doomsday flame." Speaking up to here, Gui actually pounded his chest, looking very angry. Seeing Gui's reaction, Nietion laughed. Could it be that this remnant flame of the doomsday flame is related to Gui? More than related. Gui's face was filled with anger as he said, "More than 10 years ago, this old one went to the Tyrant Cloud mountain range in search of the demon fire. My luck wasn't bad, and I found the demon fire. Unfortunately, I was injured by the doomsday flame's main body. That strand of remnant flame was precisely from the doomsday flame's main body when this old one fought with the doomsday flame. This old man went through untold hardships and finally got rid of the doomsday flames. He wanted to search for that wisp of remnant flame, but he couldn't find it no matter how hard he tried. I didn't expect it to be absorbed and fused by the kid beside you." Nietion's face was filled with black lines, and he was speechless in his heart. Actually, this couldn't be blamed on Zhang Yifeng. It could only be said that his luck was too good, while Gui's luck was too bad. Nietion guessed that the reason why Gui became a 5th-rank alchemist from a 6th-rank alchemist was most likely because he was injured by the Doomsday Flame. But for Gu Yi to be able to escape from the Doomsday Flame, it was really a miracle. One must know that the Doomsday Flame was the 13th rank demon fire, and after absorbing the baleful chi from the Doomsday Volcano for 10,000 years, the strength of its devilish nature was beyond imagination. Gu Yi, what's your goal for telling me all these? Nie Tian did not want to talk nonsense with Gu Yi and went straight to the point. Gu Yi laughed mischievously and said, Brother Nye, since we've already said till here, this old brother won't be courteous anymore. The Doomsday Flame is simply too strong. This old one can't subdue it by himself, so I wish to ask for your help. In order to win over Nie Tian, Gu Yi even changed the way he addressed him. Ask for my help. Nie Tian smiled faintly, waiting for Gu Yi to continue speaking. There was no free lunch in this world. He naturally would not help Gu Yi for nothing. Furthermore, with Gu Yi's status, what kind of expert could he not invite? But he just had to ask Nie Tian, this rookie, for help. There must be a hidden reason behind it. Gu Yi also knew what Nie Tian was thinking about, and said with a chuckle, Brother Nye, elder brother naturally won't let you help for nothing. As long as you can help me subdue the Doomsday Flame, you can take anything in my Danhar Pavilion. Also, your purple dragon whisker, you can take it back too. As Gu Yi said, he actually really wanted to return the purple dragon whisker to Nie Tian. But Nie Tian was not moved in the slightest. Instead, he said with a faint smile, Gu Yi, you're a smart person. If you take me to be a fool, then there's no need to continue talking between us. Gu Yi, this old fellow, was too crafty, even treating Nie Tian like a child to dupe. How high the value of the Doomsday Flame was, how could Nie Tian not know? Even if Gu Yi gave the Danhar Pavilion to Nie Tian, it was not even 1,000th of the Doomsday Flame. Asking Nie Tian to help him out so much, but only giving him such a low reward. This was simply insulting Nie Tian's IQ. As Nie Tian spoke, he made a posture of raising his feet to leave. Gu Yi saw this and panicked as expected. He hurriedly pulled Nie Tian and said with an awkward smile, Brother Nye, let's talk about it. How about this? You name your own price. Whatever reward you want. As long as I have it, I can give it to you. Gu Yi had a generous look. If an ordinary person saw his expression of cutting flesh, they might really be moved. But who was Nie Tian? Of course, he would not be fooled by this kind of small trick. Nie Tian turned around and looked at Gu Yi with a serious face, saying, It's not impossible for me to help you subdue the Doomsday Flame. But the Doomsday Flame that we obtain must be divided equally. Divided equally? Gu Yi panicked. His old face twitched as he said with difficulty, Brother Nye, isn't this request of yours a little too much? However, Nie Tian chuckled and said, Gu Yi, I haven't finished saying my request. What are you in a hurry for? You still have other requests? Gu Yi's face twitched. Nie Tian was not a lion opening its mouth, but a whale opening its mouth.